Good evening. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight's panel discussion is a joint meeting of the SONGS Community Engagement Panel and the Spent Fuel Solutions Coalition. My name is Dan Stetson, and I am the volunteer chair of the CEP. As you know, this last Tuesday was California Primary Day. I want to send a huge thank you to everyone who stepped up to run. Win or lose, putting your name out there these days to serve our community takes serious guts and dedication, and I'm sure I join many of you who deeply appreciate your commitment to make this country a better place. Thank you. Please note that tonight's meeting is being recorded. Our focus topic for this evening is Solving the U.S. Nuclear Waste Challenge, a dialogue on the path forward, and I'm pleased to announce that we have 4 guest speakers who have joined us here in person this evening to provide their perspectives and expertise regarding the nuclear waste challenge. The panel discussion tonight comes at a most interesting time with respect to spent nuclear fuel. As many of you know, the DOE's RFI on nuclear lifestyle innovation campuses drew responses from 26 states. Here to help inform a discussion on the state of the play are leading experts Allison McFarland, Lake Barrett, and Tom Isaacs. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Over the years, each of you have been a mentor to many, and especially to me. To facilitate tonight's discussion, we have Chris Wall, who serves as the Executive Director of the Spent Fuel Solutions Coalition and will facilitate the dialogue during the meeting. I will ask Chris to more formally introduce our panel in a few moments. I also want to thank our CEP members and SCE leaders who are here with us on the panel and joining us online this evening. Welcome. The draft presentation was posted on the SONGS website a week ago. Before we dive into the main topic, let me make a few brief announcements. First of all, our meeting will include a single focused topic, a 1-hour public comment period, and read-only updates. Second, we have also changed the public comment format so that for this meeting, as our panelists, our guest speakers, they may respond to the questions after each question regarding their area of focus as they are asked. So we'll be doing this instead of collecting questions and then asking them all at the end. We'll be responding to the questions one by one. Questions on other topics will be addressed later in the general public comment period. Third, for people who wish to ask a question or provide a comment using their phone, SCE provided new instructions for public comments via phone under the materials list on today's meeting webpage. Please note you must still submit the CEP comment form with your name, question, and last 4 digits of your phone number to be called upon to speak, and we will open the microphone via Microsoft Teams. Finally, a reminder that the slides in the read-only appendix at the end of the presentation include many updates on the CEP community updates, the Spent Fuel Solutions Coalition's, SONGS, Big Picture, and many other things. So Tritium, so there's a lot of things back in the appendix. We had them in the general area for tonight's meeting, but we just have so many things that we want to cover tonight, we needed to move them back into the appendix. Let me thank ACE January for advancing the slides for us. Next slide, please. Now, it is my honor to introduce Representative Mike Levin, who represents the congressional district that includes San Onofre. He is joining us from Washington, D.C. The congressman has been a leader in working to safely remove the spent fuel from SONGS. He last participated in a CEP meeting in 2024 when he introduced the Nuclear Waste Amendment Act. Tonight, he will deliver opening comments. Congressman, welcome. The floor is yours. Do we have the congressman?
He's waiting till 5:40.
Let's see. Do we have him in the presenters?
5 minutes ahead. Yeah, we're 5 minutes ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't see him.
Congressman, are you there? Manuel, are you checking on?
I'm not logged on.
Not logged on? Okay. Well, we'll give it a quick moment, and while we're working to get the congressman on, why don't we go ahead and move forward a little bit? We have a quick meeting, and if we're able to get him, we'll bring him back on. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide, please. Here you see our agenda and speakers. Fred Bailey, SCE Vice President of Generation and Chief Nuclear Officer, will provide introductory remarks. Next, Mark Morgan with SCE Nuclear Regulatory Affairs will provide an update stemming from a recent NRC inspection at SONGS. Then we will dive into our focus topic for the evening. For CEP members, we will work in your presentations after each individual presenter. So I was in error when I sent out an earlier email that we would wait till all presenters make their presentation. So you have, for instance, after Allison's presentation, if you have a question for her, please let us know, and then we'll move forward with the next one. Following the presentations, we'll take a short break and dedicate an hour to public comment. Manuel Camargo of SCE will support tonight's Q&A. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Fred for his comments regarding the agenda. Fred?
Yeah, thank you, Dan, and good evening. As a reminder, SCE's decommissioning is guided by safety, stewardship, and engagement with always safety first. On behalf of SCE, I want to thank our guest panelists, Lake, Allison, Tom, and Chris Wall, who'll be facilitating this discussion tonight, and the panel members. I hope we can get and connect with the Congressman Mike Levin. I wanted to share that tonight offers a rare opportunity for the panel and the public to engage with nationally recognized experts in nuclear regulation, spent fuel management, and policy. Mark Morgan, our manager for Nuclear Regulatory Affairs, will also review the results of a recent NRC inspection, including a low-level violation. Let me be clear, even though it's the lowest level violation with the NRC, any regulatory non-compliance is unacceptable, and corrective actions are in place to prevent recurrence. I'm also pleased to share that we're planning and we're going to be performing improvements to the beach access walkway at San Onofre State Beach this summer to maintain the north to south public access. Additional details, as Dan mentioned, is available in the read-only section of the presentations. We welcome your comments. We welcome your questions during the public comment. And with that, back to you, Dan.
Thank you, Fred. Let's try once again and see if Congressman Levin is here. I think we've opened a microphone for Michael. Congressman Levin, are you there?
We don't see him online. So he's not online.
Yes, so if he's not online, I say that we move on. I placed a couple of calls to see if we can get Representative Levin on the call, but I think for now, Dan, I would just proceed with the rest of the meeting, and if we can, just plan to interject, and given the time difference between here and his DC office, which is where he is today.
Okay. He said just go move on. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide then. Thank you. As we all know, there are a lot of things happening in Washington, D.C. right now, and things probably are changing by the minute. Here you see a list of the volunteers who serve on the CEP. As you can see, the CEP represents a cross-section of local stakeholders, from business and organized labor to schools, environmental groups, local elected officials, and Native Americans. Although our CEP member alternates are not listed here, they also play a vital role and actively stay informed about SONGS activities. Each of you are very important to the fabric of the CEP. I want to say special thanks to Victor Cabral, our Vice Chair, and Secretary Martha McNicholas, and also recognize Marnie Magna, who is here. And Marnie represents the Sierra Club. She's been on the panel for as long as I can remember, and she is retiring after tonight's meeting. So Marnie, I think we all owe you a debt of gratitude, and thank you for your many years of active participation on the CEP. You will be missed.
I will miss all of you. Your hard work.
So I know you're going to go spend a lot of time with your grandchildren. Can't think of a better thing to do. Okay, so next slide, please. Reminder on our public comment. Here you see the directions for participating in public comment. As always, members of the public had the opportunities to submit comments and questions in advance. Comments may be submitted by email to newcom@songssce.com, and that address is available on the meeting webpage. During the meeting, folks can also submit written comments or sign up for oral comments using the online CEP form. For members of the public joining us in person, please complete a CEP question comment card available at the entrance, and we will add your question to the list in the order that they are received. If you wish to speak, fill out the same card, and we will add you to the queue for the public comment, and you will be called upon to speak. For CEP members here in person, please wait, as I mentioned before, after each guest panelist and have completed their presentation, and then you may ask your questions. Then please turn your tent card up like this, and Chris Wall will be.
He's on.
Okay, we have the congressman here, so let's go ahead and shift to him. Congressman Levin.
Saw his photo on there.
There you go. Yeah.
Can see him.
Yeah.
I can see you. We're almost there.
We can see you, we just can't hear you.
Need to make him a presenter.
We can see you, but we can't quite hear you yet.
Have we elevated him to a presenter using
Yes,
Microsoft Teams? Okay. So we think it's something on the congressman's side?
that's correct.
Mr. Levin, if there's a different way to use your audio, I'm assuming you can hear us.
Hello?
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
There you go.
Did it work?
Yes.
We can now
it's
see
miracle.
and hear you. Thank you for your
Well-
perseverance.
Thank you for your patience. I just got off the floor where we were just voting on some fairly important stuff. So I'm very grateful to be back, and I can jump right in. I promise to be brief. I really want to thank Dan and thank everybody on the CEP for everything you're doing, as well as the Spent Fuel Solutions Coalition. I'm really grateful for all of the engagement. And, you know, the work you are doing is just really, really important as we consider spent fuel issues. And I wanted to provide just a brief update on some important spent fuel work that is happening here in Washington, D.C. And I promise not to take too long to do it, but I wanted to update you first on the DOE's Nuclear Lifecycle Innovation Campuses. This is a new effort that began in January of this year when DOE released a request for information inviting different states all across our country to express interest in hosting what they're calling Nuclear Lifecycle Innovation Campuses. And what they're intended to do is to support the full life cycle of nuclear energy, including enrichment, generation, reprocessing, storage, and disposition at the back end of the fuel cycle. The deadline for RFI responses was April 1st, and DOE hopes to announce candidate sites in July of this year and potentially break ground on the first facilities in 2027. When I was in the Energy and Water Appropriations hearing with Energy Secretary Chris Wright, I specifically asked him, this is last month, about these campuses and about more details with regard to who applied and or who responded, I should say, to the RFI. There were 28 responses, including 26 states interested in hosting one of these campuses. And it's since been publicly reported that at least 4 different states are interested in hosting a disposal site as part of being a nuclear life cycle innovation campus. I have been pressing the secretary and his team on the need to prioritize permanently shut down sites for spent fuel removal once those campuses are up and running. And I am genuinely encouraged by the steps that DOE is taking here. They are engaging in states in a collaborative approach. In that regard, it's not dissimilar from what the prior administration did with collaborative siting, because ultimately, as we all know from our many years of work and engagement, you cannot have a top-down approach and expect a different outcome from what we've experienced with Yucca Mountain and Nevada. I will say that while the campuses are a very positive development for the spent fuel program, I still do have some concerns about DOE's ability to do this right. And I plan to work with DOE to ensure that the effort is successful in removing waste from our community, from SONGS, and to push them push to ensure them that they're engaging in a very robust community building process so that it is not perceived as a top-down effort akin to what didn't work in years past. I am very pleased to see this administration focused on this objective. And, I think it's very important that as we move forward, that we do all we can to build mutual trust in this process. I do have concerns about some of the lack of clear details that have been shared with the public and frankly have been shared with Congress. I will give you one anecdotal personal example of this. We had the Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Energy, Ted Garish, to my office to discuss the Nuclear Life Cycle Innovation Campus program, and we discussed what would need to change in federal law in order to effectuate this, what changes would be necessary to the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, and also how could we focus on sites like ours, shut down plants, and make sure that we're at the top of the list in the waste removal queue. And they hadn't necessarily met with a whole lot of other offices. I think we were the very first one that they had met with. Now, they have some very ambitious targets as it pertains to legislation. We're going to do everything we can to be supportive. And I know my team, both in Washington, D.C. and in Southern California, will do all they can in this effort to work collaboratively. And the other thing that I think is very important for you all to know is that for a number of years, we've been discussing whether the DOE itself is really equipped to handle spent nuclear fuel across the United States. And I've now been working on bipartisan legislation. Many of you have been, instrumental in helping to push that legislation and support that legislation that would create a sole purpose entity to administer spent nuclear fuel as opposed to DOE. And the idea there is that you need to depoliticize the process to a degree, because as we've seen, you'll have different administrations with different ideas every 4 years, every 8 years. And ultimately, this is going to require stability and certainty of policy for a number of decades in order to really be pulled off successfully. So I think you're going to be hearing from Allison and Lake, Allison McFarland and Lake Barrett, and their Path Forward report. That group is outstanding. Allison and Lake are 2 great leaders in spent nuclear fuel and policy for decades, spanning both Republican and Democratic administrations. So I'm eager to get your thoughts once you've heard from them. And their Path Forward report shares many objectives, and also they reach many of the same conclusions as we have, as we've sought a new nuclear waste entity, sole purpose entity, and I'll let them explain their conclusions. I wanted to share two more updates before I turn it back over to Dan. First is our work on House appropriations. As I mentioned, I sit on the Energy and Water Subcommittee, and I'm proud to tell you that we advocated for and were successful in securing $112 million in the Nuclear Waste Management Program as part of the 2027 bill. That is the most that we've had and a greater number than we had last year. And of course, the bill passed the House of Representatives. It became, unfortunately, a more partisan bill than I would have wished. It passed through committee, I should say. We need to pass it through the full House floor and through the Senate, and then ultimately have a conference and then finalize the bill, just as we did last year. The final product last year wound up with, I think, right around 400 votes once all was said and done, and we were able to secure a lot of money in there for spent nuclear fuel, and we will again. So the last thing I'll mention is I've been working with my friend Mike Lawler of New York on a bipartisan bill called the Radiation Health Research Act that would direct the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, to design and implement a program to study the health effects of nuclear radiation on women and girls. The legislation requires the NIH to specifically examine the effects of radiation on pregnant women, adolescent girls, and pre-adolescent girls, while providing for long-term monitoring of participants over a period of not less than 10 years. We really do need more research to understand better the disproportionate impact that this may have on women's health, and we need to prevent exposure and develop the tools to do that. So it's a bipartisan bill. It invests in important research that'll help us understand all of this, and I'm very grateful to my friend Mike Lawler from New York to work with me on this and hopefully to move this forward through the legislative process in the months ahead. So with that, I'm very grateful again to everybody for their engagement, everybody for their work, and particularly to my friend Dan Stetson. And I'll turn it back to him to introduce two amazing people in Allison and Lake. Dan, back to you, my friend.
Thank you very much, Congressman. We greatly appreciate your leadership and focus in these areas. Have a good evening.
You too. Take care, everyone.
And if we could go back to thank you. Just to review, after each panelist, if a CEP member would like to ask a question, just go ahead and pop your card up like this. And for those CEP members joining us online, if you have a question or comment, use the raised hand icon under reactions at the top of your screen so that we can identify you and make you a presenter. For CEP members who join us late and may not be able to see their name on the list and change their status from a guest to presenter and thereby allow them to open and close their microphone. In that case, CEP members will have to use the raised hand icon for us to see their name and make them a presenter. For CEP members calling in on the phone and audio only, two things to note. First, to raise your hand, use *5. Second, to open and close your microphone, please use *6 and keep yourself muted until you wish to speak. You may refer to the new instructions for speaking via phone on the meeting webpage. For general questions on general topics, Manuel Camargo will lead and keep track of those questions and assign them to the appropriate SCE staff member to answer. Next slide, please, Ace. Thank you. Now let's move on to Mark Morgan with the NRC update. Mark, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Outstanding. So I appreciate this opportunity to address the panel. I'm going to talk a little bit about the results of our most recent inspection. The NRC was out here in late March of this year. You can see the dates. You can also see there's a reference there at the bottom of the page to the publicly available version of the NRC's inspection report. It's within their Adams database on their website, nrc.gov. In that inspection report, the NRC did identify a severity level 4 non-cited violation. And as Fred mentioned, that is the lowest severity level that's documented by the NRC in an inspection report, and it's usually associated with what they describe in their guidance as no or inappreciable actual or potential consequences. But I want to echo what Fred said. We don't consider any violation of regulatory requirements to be acceptable. It's not consistent with our site and our project values. It's not consistent with our corporate values. And as your regulatory affairs manager, of course, this is all near and dear to my heart. So we don't consider this level of performance to be acceptable, and we have entered this issue into our corrective action program. We performed a formal cause evaluation, and we've identified corrective actions that I'll talk about at the end of the slide. So what did happen, though? This involved a low-level shipment of radioactive waste to the low-level disposal facility in Clive, Utah, that's run by Energy Solutions. And there were two 55-gallon drums that were characterized as solid waste. And when they were opened by Energy Solutions in Clive, they discovered that there was liquid within the containers that was greater than the 1% limit that's outlined in regulations. So essentially what happened is we mischaracterized this waste. We should have shipped it as liquid waste. Now, I imagine the thing that's most important to members of the public who may be listening is that there were no actual or potential consequences to the public health and safety or the environment. The obvious concern with liquid in a shipment is potential for leakage during transportation. In this case, there was no leakage from the drums. They were intact when they arrived at Clive and when they were opened by Energy Solutions. And in the worst case, if you want to talk about potential consequences, any potential leakage would have been contained by the box that they were in called an intermodal. It's the box that we place these drums in before we place them on a rail car. So I'll repeat it again. There were no actual or potential consequences to public health and safety or the environment. Now, in terms of corrective actions, we did take a look at our procedures. We've strengthened our procedures for the handling of mixed and hazardous waste as we prepare it for storage on site. And we focused those changes on positive verification of the contents. Now, in addition, there were later points in the process of preparing this waste for shipment where we could have caught the fact that it had been mislabeled in the first place. And we look at those as missed opportunities to identify the problem. And we have provided training to the waste package certifiers on the causes and the corrective actions and the need for procedural compliance, again, to the waste package certifiers. So I will stop there and I'll take any questions from the panel.
Thank you very much, Mark. Let me look around and see if we have any questions from our CEP members here. Okay. I don't see any questions at this time, so thanks once again for your update and report.
Thank you.
If I might have the next slide, please. Now I have the pleasure of turning this portion of the meeting over to Chris Wall, Executive Director of Spent Fuel Solutions Coalition, who will facilitate the focused presentation and dialogue. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dan, and good evening, everybody that's both here and also online. I'm excited to be here today. I'm excited to speak about spent nuclear fuel and some of the progress that's being made around the country. In fact, Congressman Levin actually stole a little bit of my thunder, so I'll adjust my comments, so please bear with me. I'd like to thank, Representative Levin for his role and all of the speakers here today, the engagement panel, and of course the members of the public. I'd also like to acknowledge San Diego County Supervisor Jim Desmond, who is here with us tonight, as well as Orange County Supervisor Katrina Foley. They serve as co-chairs of our Coalition for Spent Fuel Solutions. And as Dan said, my name is Chris Wall. I'm the Executive Director of the Spent Fuel Solutions Coalition, and we have more than 300 local governments, elected officials, utilities, environmental groups, labor leaders, Native American leaders, business organizations, and other communities and members in 18 different states around the country. We've grown significantly since we were formed in 2021, and we're proud of what we've accomplished to advocate for a permanent repository for spent fuel. And today's speakers bring considerable insight into the potential solutions that we're considering. many of which were outlined in a landmark new title report, The Path Forward for Nuclear Waste in the United States. The report, which was released by a group of nuclear experts in January, outlines recommendations to break the current stalemate and address spent nuclear fuel and high-level waste management and disposition. The report could not have come out at a better time, given the momentum that we're seeing in the country. As Representative Levin mentioned, the Nuclear Life Cycle Innovation Campus initiative has gained a lot of traction and interest. Excited to hear that more than half of the states in the United States garnered responses, more than, as I mentioned, 26 states that are potentially interested in hosting a Nuclear Life Cycle Innovation Campus. The response to the RFI is encouraging, yet the path forward is not entirely clear, as we know. There are many alternatives that merit a national discussion, as recommended in the Path Forward report. Today's discussion is a part of that conversation. We're going to hear different perspectives from 3 leading experts with extensive experience in the policy considerations around used fuel storage and disposition. Dr. Allison McFarland, one of the Path Forward's report's lead authors, will provide background information about the report and its recommendation. Dr. McFarland currently directs the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs at the University of British Columbia. She is the former chair of the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission and served on the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future. Lake Barrett, the other lead co-author of the report, will discuss the broader landscape, including where we've been in our efforts to dispose of used fuel and where we seem to be headed during this window of opportunity. An independent consultant in the energy field, Mr. Barrett previously served as the Principal Deputy and Acting Director of the Office of Civilian Nuclear Waste Management and held multiple roles at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Finally, Tom Isaacs will share his perspective on legislations, what are the must-haves, the nice-to-haves, and the deal-breakers. Tom serves as an independent advisor to Southern California Edison for nuclear waste. He has been a senior executive in the Department of Energy, was a lead advisor to the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future, and for over 20 years helped guide the Canadian Nuclear Waste Management Organization, including as chair of the Site Selection Review Group that oversaw the process leading to the successful siting of Canada's repository. He also serves as a member of the Spent Fuel Solutions Policy Committee. Okay, as Dan said, each of our speakers will make a 10-minute presentation, and we'll pause to take questions from the CEP members at the end of each presentation. I'm going to try my best to keep us on track. We have a tight agenda today, so hopefully we'll limit it to 2 questions after each of the presenters' presentations, but we will do our best to accommodate everyone's thoughts. We will then have a facilitated discussion, and I've got some prepared questions that I'll ask the panelists that I think are right on point based upon the Path Forward plan. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. McFarland to kick us off with her presentation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Waiting for the slides to come up. But in the meantime, it's been a minute, I think, since I've been here in front of the CEP, like maybe 11 years or something. But it's fantastic to be back in San Clemente and to see what's going on and catch up what's going on with songs. So 2 years ago, Lake, 2 years ago or so, Lake contacted me and said, look, we've got to do something about nuclear waste. We're not making any progress in the U.S. It's time. You know, there was a report out in 2018, but nothing has happened since then. We need to do something, and in Lake's estimation, this was a good moment. So, of course, I listened to Lake. And so we worked hard and pulled together a report. What we did, next slide, is we pulled together a bipartisan group, a small group, but with hundreds of years collectively of experience on nuclear waste issues. And it was a very broad group in terms of representation and political representation. You know, we had all the way from the left to the right. So we felt that it was balanced, and we were putting forward our best efforts at what we thought would help to move the U.S. forward in actually really grappling with this problem now. And so what I'm going to talk about tonight briefly are our top 2 recommendations. And I'm happy to answer questions from the CEP and Spent Fuel Solutions and also from the general public in the room and online, of course. With no further ado, let's take the next slide. And our top 2 most important factors to make progress is the United States needs a new organization to implement, a new implementer, the nuclear waste process. Okay, that means both the transportation and the final disposal of the waste. And I'll talk about that more in a second. And we also need to fix the funding. And I'll first explain how the funding situation is completely broken and our advice on how to fix it working with our new implementer. So first, turning to the new implementer, the next slide. All right. So what we don't have right now in the United States is a trusted, funded, single-focus organization to manage the nation's spent nuclear fuel and high-level nuclear waste. The Department of Energy, which was designated by law as the implementer, lacks public trust and is constrained by political processes. In other words, it is run by a political appointee who is often changed out every few years. Each new Secretary of Energy has a different set of visions and foci, and the Department of Energy doesn't just handle nuclear waste. Of course, it is the Department of Energy. It handles energy programs for the nation, but it also handles the nuclear weapons complex. So it is pulled in many directions. When I and Tom were on the Blue Ribbon Commission, everybody we heard from, pro-nuclear, anti-nuclear, everyone said, not the Department of Energy. And so we believe that we need a new organization. On our Path Forward group, we looked at what other countries have been doing, because actually a number of other countries are much further ahead now than the United States. Finland will open their deep geologic repository before 2030. Okay, they are deeply, no pun intended, into the construction of it. Sweden is starting to construct their repository. Canada selected a repository in 2024. They are already into their licensing process. France is into the licensing process. Switzerland has selected a repository and will finalize that selection by 2031, et cetera. And what most of these countries had in common was their implementer was an independent corporation established by nuclear reactor owners. And in the case of Switzerland, also the government. So that led to our suggestion of a new corp, a nuclear reactor owner-led corporation. So let me explain a little more about what we mean by that. Next slide. So we envisioned that, and this would be, we imagine, put into law, that the new corp would manage, transport, store, and dispose of commercial spent nuclear fuel. This is all the fuel that is covered under the current contract that exists in the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. They, of course, could, if they wanted to, contract with any new reactors that are actually developed in the United States for disposal of their waste, but their waste is not covered by the contract in the existing legislation. They would be obligated to dispose of Department of Energy-owned high-level waste and spent nuclear fuel, subject, of course, to a mutually acceptable contract. And by law, the new corp would be required to use a collaborative consent-based siting process and enter into a hosting agreement with the state and affected local government or Indian tribe if an Indian tribe is in fact going to be one of the hosts. We imagine that The new corp would be run by a board of directors, similar to how any corporation operates. And the board of directors would be selected by members of both operating and decommissioned nuclear power plants. And the board would basically have fiduciary responsibility. They would determine if there were any future disposal fees needed, et cetera, that kind of thing. Now, you're all saying, well, wait a minute, who's going to oversee them? And we imagine in law an established oversight process. Next slide. Next slide. Oh. Right, thank you, we are there. So we imagine an advisory committee that would be established in law, okay? The advisory committee would oversee New Corp's activities. It would have regular meetings. It would be required to report regularly to Congress and to the public. And it would have a diverse membership. It would have technical expertise, social science expertise, expertise in siting facilities. It would have representatives from affected states or local communities or tribal communities as needed. And we didn't limit that membership. It could expand beyond that. And of course, the new corp would, of course, for any facility that it cited, if it were going to cite a repository or some kind of storage facility, that it would be required to get a license from the nuclear regulator, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, okay? And so that's how we imagine the oversight would work. Next slide. So I also mentioned fixing the funding, because the funding is broken. So let me explain how it's broken. You may be aware the Nuclear Waste Fund, which was established by the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, is now at $50 billion. This was money paid by electricity customers, paid by ratepayers at a cost of 1/10 of a cent per kilowatt hour. So you folks here paid into that. But Congress has unfortunately treated this money as if it were tax dollars. And so it subjects any appropriations of this money to arcane rules like the Grand-Rudman-Hollings Act. And so Congress has made it so it is almost impossible to actually appropriate money from this fund. That is not taxpayer money. And so as a result, money from this fund has not been allocated to nuclear waste disposal since 2010, so 16 years. And currently, this money is being used by Congress to offset the federal debt. Really not what it was intended. Okay. There's also a breach of contract. So in the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, the government, the Department of Energy, established a contract with all the reactor owners that said that they would begin to take nuclear waste away by 1998. Of course, that never happened. And so all the nuclear reactor owners sued the federal government for partial breach of contract, and they won. And so money is being paid out of the judgment fund, the same fund that you've been hearing about for other reasons lately. And to date, and that's taxpayer money, by the way, and so to date, $12 billion of taxpayer money has been paid to reactor owners to help manage their spent fuel, and we're on the hook for $40 billion more of taxpayer money. So this is a broken financial system. And so what we suggest the solution is, next slide, is that, of course, New Corp needs funding when it needs it. So we suggest that we start with the interest from the existing $50 billion nuclear waste fund. That should go to New Corp on an annual basis. Annually, that would be almost $2 billion. If New Corp doesn't use it, they will put it into an escrow account, a real escrow account, which they can draw from when needed. Eventually, all the monies would have to be, from the waste fund, would have to be transferred, but this gives time to figure that out. And we also felt, all of us felt, that it was essential that money from the nuclear waste fund be used solely for the purpose of waste disposal and preparation for disposal, okay? Not for reprocessing or recycling. I'll make that clear right now. Next slide. We also addressed a potential linkage between any kind of temporary storage and a permanent repository. So we said that because there are so many sites that are like San Onofre, like Songs, that are shut down, permanently shut down in the country, there are actually 17, that Nucorp should be allowed to operate, if they feel they have enough money to do so, a temporary storage facility. And that temporary storage facility would only be able to accept a limited amount of waste so that it doesn't become a de facto permanent repository. And so that's how we've dealt with any kind of linkage between temporary and permanent storage. Next slide. It's the last
Dr.
slide.
McFarland, oh, this is the last slide. Okay,
Yep.
great, perfect.
Okay, so we feel we've all benefited from electricity produced by nuclear power. We really have to act, as you all know, to make progress on moving the spent fuel to a safe and permanent deep geologic repository. I think we've proven over the last 44 years that the old method is not working and we need a new one. And so we feel that those who already manage the waste be the ones who continue to align financial and other incentives to dispose of spent fuel. So we suggest a new corp, and we suggest new legislation is needed to establish this in law. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. That was super informative. Is there a question or two, I should say? Yes, sir. Victor.
My question, I'll reserve my judgment about Nucor, but the last administration.
Closer, please. Closer to the mic, please.
Okay. I'm looking out into space, but that's all right. The last administration had a policy. It's called consent-based siting. And that consent-based siting, they decided to spend, I don't know, $23 to $26 million to not ask the industry, but to ask professors, communities, minority groups, what the best solution is for this. And that was their strategy, and I understand that. I still haven't seen a report on that. Maybe there is one. But I never saw the results, even though we spent $26 million on it. It's quite a significant sum of money. We probably will never hear back on that report. But that was a strategy of the Biden administration. We have a new administration now that has a philosophy that we're going to get into these life cycle campuses. And they've already studied many of them, as you saw. There's one in Clive, Utah. And others, that they are saying we're going to work with a partnership with states and counties and figure this out, which is really the way it should be done. So my concern is about legislation. I worked 25 years in D.C. I did the crime bill. I 6 major pieces of legislation. This legislation is at least 5 years in the making, in my view, maybe longer. So why would we spend our time and effort on pursuing that avenue instead of just saying, let's get behind this administration and figure out how we find the right place right now?
Well, I think in some ways you've already answered the question, because you pointed out that the Department of Energy under the Biden administration was doing one thing, and now the Department of Energy under the Trump administration is doing another thing. And so in 2028, if we have a new president and a new leadership in the Department of Energy, we may be doing something even different. So that's why, and this is something that the Blue Ribbon Commission said, you need continuity. This is a long-term project, citing a repository, okay? And so you need an organization that can exist for many, many decades, okay? And has leadership that is going to last a long time, not change every 2 years or every 4 years. And so I think we've proven that if we keep going with this government agency model, especially Department of Energy model, we're going to be having this conversation in another 20 years, the same conversation.
Dr. McFarland, thank you. I think that was a great answer. I'm going to move it along to Lake so he can jump into his presentation.
Okay.
Ted
But
Quinn had a question.
Oh, there's another question. I'm sorry. Okay. I don't want to be the bad guy here, but we're already well behind our pace, so.
Just a quick one.
Sure, great.
I just question how do you overcome the distrust that the public has for the nuclear generator folks by allowing them to be now the trusted entity that will take care of the waste? I'm curious that it seems like
This is the for-profit question.
a tough one.
It's
How
a
do you
great, it's a
deal with
great, it's a great question because it's true. I mean, there's many places in the country where there is a lot of distrust of the nuclear industry, but there are also other places in the country where there's a lot of trust. You can see. And those folks are where we can learn. Okay? Those folks have a lot to offer in terms of leadership and how you generate trust with your local community.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not going to characterize the situation here, but there are plenty of places where that trust exists, and I think you can draw from that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Lake, we're going to turn it to you.
Okay, if we could start the slide deck, then I'll try to address some of those questions as I go through this. Allison described our report, and it is heavy lift legislation, as your point is. But there's opportunities coming, working with the states and with private industry where it can fit together. So next slide, please. These are going to be rather busy, but I'm not going to go through them, but we'll come back if people wish to. But basically, back from 1983 to 2010, we thought we were going to have a geologic repository in this country. That failed from the top down, as Congressman Levin said it. So basically, next slide, that didn't work. So the fuel sits where it was made. Ensong is the prime example of that. This is not an acceptable situation. This has been what's been going on from 2010 until now. Now, maybe it's going to continue, but this is what we've had. So now, this administration, next slide, please, is changed quite a bit, okay? Their nuclear life cycle innovation campuses is a completely different cultural change. It's now to shift from the government having a job to the private industry and the states and the locals are together with leaders. So it's business driven. We all know about AI centers, the need for electricity. Things have changed, drastically changed in the last just a few years. So this is driving a new need for electricity. Nuclear electricity is now really what's going to carry a lot of that. Yes, wind and solar and others will play a role, but as far as for heavy duty lifting of these 24/7 AI centers, you're going to need nuclear. But anyway, so this needs a fuel cycle to support the nuclear energy, and that includes the back end and being responsible in our generation to dispose of our own waste, okay? So, but as the states now have an interest in the nuclear energy world in these campuses, and that is put together in a total package, which includes the back end of a disposition and geologic disposal. Now, also, these 26 states came back. They are very interested in recycling, okay? Recycling may assist us in this for waste disposal, but recycling is an independent issue from waste disposal. But it's an important part in finding a bottoms-up, state community-driven hosting arrangement, which is critical. Next slide, please. So this is what it looks like if we go into this type of approach. Fuel goes from reactors into receiving facility, and it goes into some direct disposal. Some may go to be reprocessed. Some of these new advanced reactors require reprocessing because they're special different types of technical fuel, different from the old LWR fuel. We can go into this if you wish later, but this is the concept that is being looked at by the DOE at this time. Next slide. Exactly which is going to be where, they're talking about maybe 3 or 4 campuses. It's going to be split up. It'll be very dynamic, And it really is driven by the states and the communities on what they're willing to do. And also the private industry. Will the money flow from private industry to support the fuel cycles that's needed to produce the electricity? As we all know, there's billions of dollars being invested by private corporations to drive the AI world. And we think some of that needs to go into responsibility for dealing with the waste that we currently have, like at SONGS, and the waste that they're going to produce in the future. Next slide, please. So a little bit about what's likely to happen in the future along what Congressman Levin talked about earlier. Okay, first, DOE is engaging with states and communities and private companies and other government agencies to put together a general agreement. Their goal is to come out with memorandums of understanding in July. That's their target. Will they make it or not? I don't know. But they're working hard to do that, and states have responded promptly in a short period of time, and so they're working on it. Now, how these are going to work out, we don't know yet. But these are complex social, political, legal, economic, financial amongst these parties. And it depends on all the parties, the three, the DOE, the private industry, and the host state and communities. They have to trust each other, and they have to perform. Not on promises with some of these private industry things. They've got to actually perform. Next slide, please. So the second step will be, once there's this general understanding about who's going to do what where, then you have to come up with the actual hosting agreements, performance agreements. They have to be legally sustainable. They have to withstand many administrations. Can't be the next president changing his mind or the next governor changing his mind or her mind. So these are going to be complex, sustainable, multi-organizational partnerships that have to be put together that mutually works for everybody. And it needs to maintain a passive geologic disposal capability at the very end point. But there's a lot of flexibility in how you put all these pieces together that can meet the needs of a host state, so this is not another top-down failure. Next slide, please. The third step is really where Congressman Levin is a leader, is when this comes forward to Congress, Congress needs to act on it. So Congress, I don't think, is going to take our report and go work that and make that happen in absence of real progress, a real state, and a real situation. So it has to get real. So when the proposal comes forward that is agreed upon by the governor, the community, the private industry is going to put the money into it, and the DOE, and then you start to put together the sustainable legal things, which will likely require changes to the legislation such as the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. But these have to be sustainable, durable agreements that have to be bipartisan, because we're not going to do this with just one party or another, not when this country is like it is. Next slide, please. So the final policy step, where Congress is going to work this and have contracts and legal settlements and figure out how we can fix the funding, this is where I feel our Path Forward report will have a lot of impact to that. Because one of the things that all the parties are going to say, I need to have trust from you other two that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And I think when the federal government side, where DOE is constantly bombarded by the 2-, 4-, and 6-year federal election cycle. There's always an election 2 years away. And it's always critical. My party has to maintain whatever, okay? And every electoral vote is fought over tooth and nail. Every senatorial seat is fought over tooth and nail. We've got to minimize that negative impact that has hurt us historically for decades and will continue to hurt us. And I think if you have a real agreement, partnership agreement, the parties are going to demand that it have stability to it. It's sustainable. And that's where I think our report will come in and will actually take place. When will this happen? We don't know. I will tell you that nuclear waste policy amendments happen during lame duck sessions. They always have. The original 82 Act was lame duck. 87 Amendment was lame duck. We have a lame duck coming up in January, in Christmas, December of 26, and there'll be one in 28. Some people think this can be done for this lame duck this coming fall, the coming Christmas. I would be amazed if that can happen. It can happen. So I say go for it. Okay, let's get it on the table. Let's have a dialogue. Let's look at the actual proposals, the actual contracts, and make some real progress. Even if some parts of it you don't like or do like, Get it on the table, and let's work as a nation and solve our problem. Next slide, please. So this is the dialogue that's going to be going on. Your Congressman Levin, I think, is a leader with this. I loved his interaction with Secretary Wright here in the hearing a few weeks ago. It was very positive. And here you have a Democrat and a Republican working for the nation. So this administration is very aggressive on this. I hope they have disposal at the right balance. We will see. We have many new private industry players. These are big players with big money and big needs. So can they do half the things some of them claim to do? I don't think so, but I want to be open. I would never have thought Elon Musk could do the things he did. Maybe these people can, but I say they're going to have to prove it and do it if they ever want to get paid for something. We're not going to use the Nuclear Waste Fund for R&D purposes and great ideas, okay? If we have a good start, 26 states have responded. Wide variation, some of them I don't think are very critical, but if we can get 3, 4, 5, 6 that are serious, I think that's great progress, more than we've had in 16 years for sure. So I think we have promising opportunities. I think songs can be a big part of that. Going into the staging facility initially, it may not be the first ones recycled or anything like that, but I think they can be a great value here. And it's going to take everybody pulling together to make this happen. And I think the Spent Fuel Solutions Group here and songs and Congressman Levin being a leader, I think are going to be a big part of us making this work and not be 5 more years of nothing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. Who has questions? Okay, Victor's got one.
I got a question. It's a question about what you said. I agree with everything you said. Do you see any problem or issue with a dual track, though? That is, pursuing this new core and simultaneously looking at what this administration is doing and saying, there's a window of opportunity here that exists, and we need to, as an organization, get behind that, see if we could push that along, push them both along simultaneously. What's your reaction to that?
I think they're going to merge. I mean, I think the Path Forward report is a way to have the DOE, the implementer, be a better implementer that can fit into a successful community state-driven solution. So I see them merging. I don't see them as independent. I don't think our Path Forward alone could sustain congressional action.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Chris, there's one online.
One online. Okay.
You have a question over here.
Okay, Jim Desmond.
Oh, sorry, Supervisor.
You ready? Okay. You almost skipped me, Chris. Hey, I think this is a great presentation, and I'm really, this is forward thinking, and I appreciate you bringing this forward. And as Mayor Taylor had mentioned earlier, I'm still stuck on this $26 million thing we were going out and we're going to get some sort of input from communities about their willingness to at least look into it. When did this go out? And when did this go out to maybe you said it, but.
The Biden administration had the $26 million thing you're talking about. I think that had value in getting communities to understand it better. It was an educational process. And yes, it was at the lower levels. It was at the local communities, different groups, constituencies, but there were business people involved, and it did help develop states to understand nuclear waste and their role, because they understand they're part of the solution. They're not just Washington's just not doing it to them, okay?
So when did this RFP or whatever go out from, I guess, the current administration?
They put this out in January.
Of this year?
Of this year,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
I mean, it took them a little while to put it together.
Yeah.
They had to get their people in place, but yes, this is a strong initiative by them. And also the AI world has changed. I mean, things have changed. The stars are aligning to an opportunity we have, and I think the administration is seeing that. I think some of it may be overdone, and some of the vendors are pumping up their stock and this kind of thing. Yeah. But there are safeguards for that, and they have to perform. So a lot of these are going to drop off, and I think the real ones can survive.
Well, I liked your presentation so much. This is the second time I've seen it, or You didn't put up your generic conceptual plan?
The wrongs, this was, the one that was here was the last version, wasn't the most current version. There was a picture I had of the parts.
Yeah, I got it here.
Oh, you have it there, but this one is not the right
I
one.
know, but you didn't include it in this one. I thought that was.
I meant to, but it wasn't there. I'm sorry.
Well, because I think that conceptual plan, well, it's not there, but it was nice that you had all the energy producing and recycling and even a data center located on the same site, which is, kind of one of the challenges we have, with these data centers coming in and eating up a lot of energy and electricity. It'd be nice if they were co-located. So I'm very encouraged. I know this is kind of the 30,000-foot level. It's still at this point in time. There's a lot of things to work out. But I guess for Allison, since Chris Wall was in a hurry, I didn't get my question in. Sorry.
We're still in a hurry, Supervisor.
Huh? Okay. One of the things that you had said is that there's guardrails on the $50 billion for disposal, and that's all it's ever going to be. It's not going to be used for repurposing or recycling. And to me, I kind of question that to say, well, if repurposing and recycling is getting rid of the spent nuclear fuel or using some of that spent nuclear fuel, then there's a possibility that that would be just as good as disposing it somewhere or someplace else.
But it's not.
But it's not. I think you've got, anyway, I think we need to be open.
Reprocessing, the industry calls it recycling, but it's just reprocessing. You just take your spent fuel, you'll dissolve it, you extract your uranium and plutonium. You never reuse your uranium because it's contaminated with isotopes that make it difficult to reuse.
Okay.
So you only would reuse the plutonium that you extract, and that's 1% by weight of the spent fuel, okay? And then you would potentially, in theory, use that for light water reactors in a mixed oxide fuel, but no light water reactors in the U.S. use mixed oxide fuel, and it would cost money to.
Well, how about the uranium part? You can't reuse that?
Yeah, you won't reuse the uranium. So you still end up with high-level nuclear waste, which, say, France does this. They turn that high-level waste into a glass, but they still need a repository. That's why France is developing.
But is it reduced the amount of?
It reduces the volume, but volume is not the relevant unit of measure for a geologic repository size. It is heat production and composition of the waste, depending on the geology that you're
using. For
using.
recycling and reusing, to me, I'm not, you're much more technical than I am at this, but it seems like if we're repurposing or recycling what we've got, that is a potential, not a disposal, but reusing that. To me, that might be a potential for using some of those dollars, but I guess I'd like to see an open mind. I'd like to finish.
Sorry.
And I'd like to see an open mind on those particular, to potentially using maybe some of those dollars for the repurposing and or the recycling. I see you're shaking your head, but probably 50 years ago, they say we'd never be at this point today. So I'd like to at least have open minds on the technology is going to advance, and hopefully we have that potential. I agree we need to get rid of it, but if we can repurpose it and recycle it and reuse it in technology advances as it has, in the last 50 years, the San Onofre was like 70s technology. So I'd like to think that we'd have open minds and not just say, no, this is the way it's always going to be.
I have an open mind, but I also know quite a bit about the technology.
You do?
Okay?
I appreciate that.
And I can tell you that countries that have reprocessed have stopped it because it's so expensive. And uranium is plentiful. I'm a geologist. I've written peer-reviewed papers on uranium resources. Uranium is plentiful, and so it will be cheaper for at least 100 years. So there will not be any financial reason to do this. The United States did go down the reprocessing road in the 1960s and 70s, and they stopped because it was too expensive. It
Well-
also creates vast quantities of low-level nuclear waste and intermediate nuclear waste that you then have to dispose of and find a place to dispose of, all right? And you still need your deep geologic repository. So, because
I'm not
you
saying
still
we
need,
wouldn't need it.
because
Oh, okay, can I just interject?
parallel.
I think
Just
you've
add a
made
little
your
bit.
point.
We don't,
Yeah.
Alice and I don't agree 100% on this. We agree we need disposal, and we agree you shouldn't take the waste fund to go do recycling. But I believe that there are advantages of the recycle concept, especially in getting the governor to agree to have the facility, including disposal in his state. The governor is an elected official and has to deal with social opinion, and recycling is a lot easier than saying it's a waste facility.
Supervisor Desmond, do you have any other questions, or did you get those addressed?
John.
I'm going to.
No, I'm good. Thank you, though. Thank you.
Well, that's good discussion. That's why we're here.
Chris?
Okay.
Just a quick,
Okay.
Quick comment.
Okay. I think John, our mayor, was next. So,
did you want to,
do you have a quick comment, Fred, that you wanted to
Yes,
make?
follow up.
I'll let Fred
Then
go,
I'll-
and we'll come back to you. And
Okay.
there was also someone online too.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I appreciate the input, but with my background, having spent 25 years in a company that does recycling and reprocessing, the French have been doing it for decades. Yes, the Brits have started. The Japanese are still going after to do it on a commercial scale. And the French are investing in the next generation of reprocessing plants. So they are committed to it for a fleet of 56 reactors. They are using reprocessed uranium in a couple of reactors, not all of them. But basically 10% of the electricity is coming from recycled fuel. So just
Yeah.
thought I
So
would mention that.
that's great. That's a good perspective. Okay.
and just a quick question. What is the benefit of AI in all this dialogue?
The AI needs tremendous amounts of electricity that we don't have.
Okay.
So it's driving the electricity needs. China puts out, twice as much electricity as we do. They're going to become the leaders, and we're going to be following. So we have got to get electricity from whatever source to support that. And that's what's driving nuclear growth right now.
I see. I was thinking that maybe there was AI was part of the solution to this problem. Like trying to
no,
figure that
but there is a
No.
mismatch between how soon the electricity could be delivered from nuclear versus how soon it's actually needed for data centers. And I think it's kind of a massive mismatch.
Okay, I think it is a good comment, though. I mean, I just know in my own reading, and I'm not a nuclear scientist, but we do need some way to generate more electricity to meet that power. I mean, we're in an international competition with countries around the world, and whoever wins this, there's some people that think whoever wins this AI race is going to be leading the world. So it's definitely a relevant issue and topic. I do think we have someone online, right, Manuel?
Ted Quinn.
Ted, please. Thank you for your patience, Ted.
We can open Ted's mic.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. I wanted to thank Lake and also Dr. McFarland for their leadership in this. The two points I wanted to make is his precedent and crafting legislation. Lake, do you see that any precedent from the organization you ran, the Office of Civilian Radioactive Waste Management, or from, say, the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations, from a business perspective, are there lessons learned that we could take advantage of, and can it help us with perhaps crafting the legislation that we need for Congressman Levin and others to actually writing the legislation to incorporate those lessons learned?
Yes, I do. I think there's a lot we can learn from all the parties, focusing in on our congressional approach to change the legislation. So, yes, I do.
Was our second question?
No, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, I see we have one other comment or one more question online, if I'm not mistaken. We'll let them go first, and then we're going to make sure we have enough time for Tom Isaacs as well. And we're running a little behind, but I think everyone's engaged, so we're going to keep going here.
As long as it's from the CEP.
Oh, from the C.
If it's from a CEP member online, yeah.
Oh, okay. And is it not?
I don't know.
How do we know? I see it's green. Do you want to wait? Is that person?
What's
okay.
the name?
What's the name of the person that's got the
Back of
question?
the room?
Al, somebody.
Al?
Dan Snyder, no. Yeah.
Okay, I think maybe Emmanuel will keep going.
We do have an hour reserved
For questions?
later in
Yeah.
this meeting for questions, and that should be adequate for all members of the public to engage at that time.
Yeah, and that's right after our break, right? Okay, great. So apologize for making you wait online, but there'll be ample time to do that if you could just be patient. Thank you. Okay, Tom, you're up.
Thank you, and hello, everybody. I'm biting my tongue because I have strong views about this reprocessing question, but I'm not going to use my 10 minutes on it. I will tell you that when the Blue Ribbon Commission, which was an august group of commissioners, discussed all the issues that were in that report, the most contentious issue by far was coming up to a single point of view on how to talk about reprocessing and recycle. It is not an easy issue, but I don't want to talk about that right now. But if you want to ask me a question, I have lots of thoughts. I want to start by saying that I think Allison and Lake and their colleagues have done a great job by putting forward this report, bringing light once again to the fact that we need action if we're going to solve this problem and if we're ultimately going to get the spent fuel off of the site at San Onofre and other plants around the country. I will tell you that by my count, it is at least the 5th report, starting with the Blue Ribbon Commission report, which started when they stopped the program, at least the 5th report to look at what we need to do, all 5 of which have come to basically the same conclusion, which is that you need to take this out of the Department of Energy and you need to give the new entity access to the funds it needs in order to do that job. What we need is, and we should be clear-eyed about this, is legislation in order to get this program back on track. We need to articulate the need for this program. It is too easy and has been too easy for people to do nothing, to just push this down the road. But eventually, doing nothing has consequences, and we will wind up paying for it. We need to effect the sense of urgency behind this program. What I want to do, I just want to quickly talk about 3 things. The first one, I want to talk about some of the qualities that need to be there in order for this program to be successful. It's not enough to have legislation. The second thing I want to do is talk about the legislation itself and how we might think about it. And then third and last, I just want to talk a little bit about this issue about whether we should have a storage facility and a repository, storage being temporary in place of ultimate disposal, then have a disposal facility, and whether there needs to be some linkage. Right now in law, there is. We need to talk about how to fix that if we're going to be successful. So what are some of, you know who I am, some of the key qualities that are important here and have been discussed. The more independent this new entity is, the better. The most rare sentence that you will hear in Washington, D.C. is, my predecessor did everything right, I'm just going to continue to do what they do. That never happens in Washington. It doesn't matter if it's the same party or another party. People need to feel that they're putting their imprint on things. And yet, as you've heard, this is a program that will last generations. I've been working closely, I'll reflect a little more on this, with the Canadian program. They were able to come up from a standing start to a site that's approved, and it took them 20 years. And that was really quick. They did a really good job. So if we're going to be successful, the program like this has got to be buffered from elections, buffered from administrative changes, buffered from elections and those kinds of things. The second thing is the fewer demands on the program, the better. I used to tell the Canadian, when I spoke to them, that you should go slow to go fast. They translated that into Canadian, so they say go slow to go far. But what it basically means is if you're going to be successful in this program, you need to take the time to do the thing right. You need to engage with all the political entities, with the communities that are going to be involved, with the transportation corridors, and build and earn a sense of trust and partnership for this kind of thing to work. I managed the international program for 10 years in the Department of Energy in this area. I've been to all the places that are there. The places that are successful all do this. They all are committed. and they all have the right kinds of people to do this. Not everyone can do this kind of a job. There are certain very special techniques and capabilities that it takes for people to be able to go into a community, to go into a political circumstance, to deal with all of the many things that will adjust over time, and keep your eye on the ball, but be adaptable enough to meet the changes that will occur inevitably over time that Lake reflected on a bit earlier. Economics will change, values will change, political circumstances will change. All of that requires you to keep your focus on the bottom line, which is getting the spent fuel off of these sites into temporary storage and ultimately disposed of, and at the same time doing it in a way that builds trust and partnerships so that these communities are going to be willing to deal with it. The first time I went to Finland and visited their program, Allison talked about Finland, I came back and I walked into the senior management meeting in the Department of Energy. I said, you know something? They're smarter than we are. And then I wrote a paper about it and everybody was very unhappy to hear that. They thought the United States was the best in everything. And of course, from science and technological point of view, we're as good as anybody on the planet, but they understood the job. They understood what it took to be successful here, whether they were the technical leaders or the institutional leaders in that program or dealing with society. They knew how to engage people and engage communities in a way that built trust over time. They demonstrated that they were competent. They demonstrated that they were well-intentioned. They listened to people's concerns and didn't say, we're the government or we're the scientists, trust us. They said, if you're concerned, we're concerned. And they dealt with it. And they dealt with it over and over again. They made promises and they delivered. They made promises and they delivered. That's how you build trust. And it takes time and it takes energy. And if you think that's taking away from your schedule, you're going to fail. And that's why the idea that somehow we have these demands for progress in a sort of a fast way undermines the ability to be successful. So what are some of the key features that are going to be required for this organization? You've heard a bit of this already. They need to be stable over long periods of time. I once did a calculation looking at the leaders of the waste program in the Department of Energy. At that point in time, the average tenure of a leader, half of the time it was Lake Barrett in an acting capacity, the average tenure was 19 months. Every year and a half we had a change in leadership. I've been dealing with the Canadian Nuclear Waste Management Organization. They're now 23 years old. They're still on their third president in 23 years. And she's still in the job, and I imagine will be in the job for some period of time. The stability, the ability, and by the way, the people that they pick change their characteristics with time. When you're in the siting mode, which we were for much of those 20 years, the kind of person you need leading that organization, the first one was a totally non-technical person. She walked on water, as far as I was concerned, but she was originally a school teacher from Saskatchewan, but she had the magic. She understood how to deal with the social and the political as well as the technical issues. So it's very important that we get to the place where this program is able to be stable. As I already mentioned, you have to be able to recruit and pay the right people if you're going to be successful. The people, again, in Canada, but also in Finland and Sweden that we've heard about, those people are true professionals. When it comes to the director of communications, the manager of communications, these people are seasoned, outstanding people for leading communications. When they come to the manager of engagement, these people have extreme expertise and experience in how to engage with these kinds of difficult, controversial facilities, and so forth. We already talked about the fact that you need to keep your eye on the mission, but you need to be adaptable. Things change with time. We see it in programs in the United States, and we see it in programs overseas. Sometimes what a community wants is not what you think they want. You think they want money, and what they want is something else. And I don't have time right now, but some of the examples that made a difference in places like Finland and Sweden were amazing. One of the things that happened in Finland, was they built a home for their senior citizens in the middle of the city. That's what the community wanted. The program didn't say, well, that's not our problem, that's your problem. They said, if that's the compelling problem in this city. Let's work together to make it happen. And then what did they do with the old facility for the seniors? They turned it into their office in the town. That's the kind of creative thinking that's required. They must be unambiguously motivated and incentivized to do the job. And that's where I think there's a question about how to formulate this new organization. My own view is, and the Blue Ribbon Commission had a slightly different recommendation than the one that the Path Forward report did. It's a question as to whether or not the utilities are the right entity to solely manage this program. The utilities in this country, there are far more, and they're far more diverse than they are in countries like Finland and Sweden and Canada, which only have one or two utilities to deal with, and they're very homogeneous in their dealing. In this country, they're very diverse, and so they have different objectives and different priorities in those utilities, and some of them are in the money-making business. And this is a program for the public good. It's got to be done cost-effectively, but its reason for being is to solve a national problem. And not only does whoever run this program have to be credible and focused on doing the right thing, they have to be seen as credible in doing the right thing. And there may be some issues there. The money that you put into this program came from the utilities. They're no longer putting money into that program. They're getting money from the taxpayer, from us, to manage the spent fuel because the Department of Energy didn't meet its obligations. So there may be some perception that the utilities are perfectly happy with the things going on just the way they are. They're no longer putting money in to pay. They're getting money from us to manage. That's an issue. A second issue is some utilities didn't put money in at the beginning to pay for the waste that was created before the law was passed. They were given an option to pay up front or to pay later. There are certain utilities right now who have not paid, who, if the program gets back on track, will owe a lot of money back into the federal government. These are perception issues that I think need to be fully complicated out in the open so that people can discuss what's the right way to formulate this. With regard to siting, it's true that the utilities are the experts on the nuclear activity, but with regard to siting, the nuclear is important, but it's not the most important part of siting. The most important side of siting is what I call the ologies: geology, hydrology, climatology, volcanology, to make sure that when you pick a place and put the waste in the ground, it stays there. And so that's a very different set of skills than the nuclear community has. And the second thing, in addition to the ologies, is the socio-political engagement aspects. And there are lots of folks out there who are expert in this, and I'm not so sure that the nuclear community alone is the best to do this. I don't say this because I think what the Path Forward report is recommending is wrong. I say it because I think we need a robust discussion of how to formulate this entity, because you're going to get one bite at the apple, and that apple needs to be done in a way that's going to last for generations. So my last comment on that is that when legislation comes, like Lake Barrett says, it comes in a session that's very condensed and very quick, and you need to be prepared. And so I recommended that we have 3 buckets of things to prepare. One, what do we need to have essentially in new legislation when the debate comes? And the things that need to be there are the things that Lake, Allison, and their committee have recommended. The second thing is, what are things that are desirable, but you're not going to fall on your sword over, but things that you very much would like to have in the legislation so that when the dialogue and the debate comes, you've got that there. And the third one, what things can you absolutely not have in there that are essentially poison pills that will keep you from being successful? The linkage that's in law between building a temporary storage facility and building a repository makes the temporary storage facility essentially not useful. That one sentence in there was put in there without understanding, I believe, fully the implications of what they did. So it made, for the last decade, 20 years, 30 years, the idea of building a storage facility with the current legislation and the current law not useful. We need to be prepared to make sure that none of those things creep in. I think I will stop there, Chris. I know we've been going over, and take any questions.
Thank you, Tom. You know, it's so unfortunate that you're not passionate about this issue. I've had the benefit of working with Tom for 5 years now, and I see it all the time. So we're very fortunate to have Tom here as a part of it and have his expertise. Okay. Did anyone have any questions on the panel for Tom? Yes, sir.
Yes, does Canada and Finland have the same type of independent corporation that's what they're doing that too?
Yeah.
Okay.
Canada, Finland, Sweden, Switzerland.
They also have one utility or two utilities, and those utilities are all of a like.
Right.
And frankly, the culture in those countries is that they feel an obligation to solve this problem. And they feel that nobody in those communities would ever threaten the health and welfare of the people in that community because they're raising their families in those communities. And they're also very proud of their science and technological progress. So when you look at the circumstance, you have to understand the broader context of those things. Those people are running wonderful programs. They're very successful. We need to learn from those programs. We need to adapt them in a method that will be successful, I think, in this country, and we need to have a discussion about how to best do that.
Yeah, thank you.
Our country is much more complicated. We can still do it.
Yeah.
Canada, you know, all the fuels, 90% of it's in Ontario, and it's Ontario Hydro is a government utility, but it's still same type of thing. But Finland is too. You know, we have 30. You know, so ours is more complicated. But we can do the same kind of thing, and we can learn from them on all the points that Tom and Allison made.
Okay, thank you.
Martha, I think you have a next question.
I mean, I think I agree with trying to pull it out of the DOE, but has this country ever successfully done that, taken an operation that's under a federal department and tried to basically privatize it? And I don't think the post office is a good example, but
Yeah.
has that ever been done?
Yes. We have. We have. The first thing that comes to mind, something else hopefully will come to your mind. USEC. Same thing.
Keep going.
United States
Uranium Enrichment Corporation.
Uranium Enrichment Corporation was government-run, and then it was turned private into the Centrus Corporation. Maybe that was 10, 15 years ago? Yeah.
At least.
More.
Yeah, or more. Okay, 20. Yeah.
But yes, it's not common, but yes, it's been done. It's not easy.
Okay, I have one more question while I have the microphone. I understand the idea of the innovation campuses and the push with the current administration. My worry is there's a lot of maybe focus on reprocessing, recycling, because that's the new and shiny, and people want to do it. But are we going to lose in that? It kind of goes back to the 28 states or 26 states that were interested in it, but only 4 interested in being a repository. Okay, that narrows the. I'm worried that the disposable and repository is going to get lost in some of the new and shiny.
I personally think that that is a completely legitimate concern, especially the way that the RFI was worded. It was not clear in the wording of the RFI that this came with an obligation to dispose of spent fuel. You know, there was some vague language. You probably know what it is, like, but
disposition.
So, yeah,
A new word.
Yeah, it's so I think it's a legitimate concern.
Okay.
Yes, you're correct.
One more question, and I know you've both talked about a deep geological repository and boreholes or whatever we do. Is it okay to bring up he who should not be named and Yucca Mountain? Is there a chance that, I mean, that's already half done already? Is that a possibility?
It's a possibility. If the state is willing, certainly it's on the table. If the state is not willing, it's not on the table.
Okay.
So if the state of Nevada, who was not one of the 26 states, wants to come forward, I'm sure the federal would love to talk to them. But at this stage, they're not.
Okay.
So what could happen in the future? We don't know.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the panel other than the CEP?
Thank you for the presentations. You're all kind of, we're on the similar theme. I'm trying to understand that you talked about a steady stream of funding and using some of the money that's already there, but I need to understand more clearly what the incentive is for this corporation to execute it if there isn't a business element. How is it any different than government? How is it going to be more efficient, effective? I understand the changing political tides, but just anyway, that's my question.
So there are a couple motivations. I mean, the nuclear industry, I think, recognizes that they do have to manage this material. They do have to, SCE realizes, you don't want to be holding the ball forever, for decades, right? I mean, you want this to be managed and disposed of. Okay, so that's one thing. But there is a money-making opportunity in here if you decide that you want this corporation to be a for-profit corporation. If any new facilities are created, new nuclear power plants or your reprocessing facilities, they can contract with the Nucorp to dispose of their waste. Of course, Nucorp is going to charge them. They don't work for free, right? And the Nucorp will also work with the Department of Energy, so they will charge the federal government to manage their waste. So there is a way to turn this into a for-profit entity if you want to.
I would say you have a good point, that it's been very difficult in this country, and I distinguish that from what I told you about my experience in other countries. In other countries, they see an obligation here. They see a moral obligation. They created the waste. They benefited from the power. It's not going away. I don't care what you do. The waste is going to be there, and it has to be handled. And they feel a moral obligation, and the country supports that to come up with a solution. It's not easy. It's not quick. It's not cheap, but they feel that. This country, my own personal point of view is you are so lucky to have Southern Cal Edison here at the forefront of this, because as I look around the country, there are very few utilities that have leaned forward in solving this problem. They talk about it, they would like to have it solved, but they don't lean forward in this because it's not something, it's not a popular thing. You're not going to win the Miss Congeniality contest by being in favor of nuclear waste management. So it's very difficult. We need an organization put together that has that as its responsibility, that has it as its priority, and that feels an obligation to solve it, because they're going to get hit in the face when they try to do this. There's no way around it. It's a social, political challenge in this country.
Okay. Any other questions? Dan? Oh, Dan does. He's been laying in wait there.
I've been holding my tongue, and I appreciate that we're running over time. But number one, I'm just so proud. Many members of the CEP, in terms of stability, have been on this panel for more than a decade. And I really want to thank them and appreciate their service on it. But my question is, as a CEP, as a community, what can we do to try to move a solution forward?
It's a good question. I mean, my advice is you really have to keep the political screws on. I mean, it's going to take a lot of political pressure to make progress. And the more that you can do what Spent Fuel Solutions does is work together with other communities. Now there are a lot of shut down plants. Okay, there are a lot of communities that don't want to become the permanent de facto repositories for this material. And so there's, the more political pressure we can build, the better. And there are folks, Congressman Levin is an example of folks who, in Congress, who know that this is an issue that they do have to act on. So we just need more pressure, I think. You guys have other ideas?
You need to spread the word. I mean, you need more Congressman Levins like that to make something happen. So you need to go out and talk with other states, talk with other utilities, and help make it happen. And you can. You have influence.
So one of the things So I agree with what Allison and Lake are saying. One of the things I think we don't do a very good job of is actually describing the fact that for many communities, being a host of a facility like this can be a great benefit. We see this around the world. We see it in the United States at a place called Carlsbad, New Mexico, which has had an operating repository for defense radioactive waste. I forget how many years, more than
Since
15.
1998.
Yeah, it's a long time. The community there is absolutely happy with that facility being there. They'd like to expand the responsibilities there. They benefited in all kinds of ways. If you go to Yrjönköping, Finland, the people there are wildly happy with hosting their repository program there. If you go to Forsmark, Sweden, the people there are wildly happy. They competed against another community. And I mean, it was a real competition. They both wanted the facility because they saw all the benefits. It's not just money. It's vibrant, makes the community vibrant. It brings world-class scientists and technologists and educators and infrastructure and a future. That's what happened in Canada. The community in Canada that chose this facility called Ignis. It's a little community of 1,000 people, really in a remote area. Their community, like many of these communities, it was a forestry and mining community, and like they do, they went bust. And now you're sitting there, and the young people have no future, and the people see that their kids are going to move away. And here's a facility that has the opportunity to bring a vision of a future that they can all believe in. In fact, the Canadians gave money to these communities to do what they call visioning, which is to figure out themselves what they wanted their future to be. And if it didn't include a nuclear facility, fine, that's fine. But if it helped them achieve their vision, that was something that the community could volunteer to learn more about and get engaged and make a decision. And ultimately, Ignis and the First Nation, the Wabigoon Lakes Ojibwe Nation, they're both there, agreed to host this facility, and they're very happy.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Chris, there is another CEP member online, Michelle Anderson, that has a question.
Okay, great. Michelle, you're up.
Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So my name's Michelle Anderson. I serve as Orange County's emergency manager, and I want to thank the panel for their presentation. And my question is really focused on, as we're writing the legislation for this potential corporation, really trying to emphasize the role of local emergency response in the area where this corporation eventually operates. Orange County benefited over the years, I think San Diego County too, from the previous requirements when San Onofre was an operating plant of having FEMA-graded exercises that really brought jurisdictions and different first responder disciplines to the table to train, exercise, and really equip for responding to incidents at San Onofre. However, once they began the decommissioning process, we were fortunate that Edison stayed at the table and continued to do training and exercises with us. They didn't have to do that. In the future, right, if this corporation gets off the ground, one of my concerns is that the future corporation may not be that accepting of local government, local responders. And so I would ask the panel, are you guys putting in the regulations considerations for local government and local populations to have an active say and an active role in how emergency response surrounds potential sites?
Well, I'll start. I mean, I think you want to spend the money, no matter who it is, proportional to the risk, okay? And you want to have good relations with the community. So there's two factors there. From a community relations point of view, I can see some of it, okay, being done. From a risk point of view, this fuel is old and cold, and it doesn't really go over, it has nothing to drive it anywhere. So as far as emergency response, it's minimal from a risk point of view. And I don't think like the waste fund should be spending monies where it really isn't needed. But you need to have good community relations. utilities all do that all the time with their neighbors, and so you want to appropriately support them. So, but as far as putting it into legislation, I personally don't think it belongs there. If you want to have good community relations, that is in there. But as far as defining, you have to pay money for emergency response, I personally don't think so.
I guess the way I, if I can just add my own view on that, this is Allison. I think that the emergency response and community needs and state needs can be covered in the agreement, the hosting agreement that would be required in law. So if you really wanted to specify in law, you could say, you know, the New Corp has to enter a legally binding hosting agreement with the state and the local community or tribe, and that binding agreement should include something about emergency response, et cetera.
If I may add just one quick point.
Yeah, sure.
There will be a need for a response around the transportation piece of the fuel. I agree, not the same risk in terms of disposing of it, but when it's going to be fuel getting to the location, there's going to be, just like today the regulation specifies that, the need for some response.
No, that's a great,
Thanks, Fred.
Great point, Fred. I mean, that the regulator would hopefully require, you know, emergency response training in the regulations. Yeah.
Are there any other questions of the panel?
Well, and so if I could, can I just summarize then what I heard?
Sure.
And I apologize because I'm going to be very blunt. So what I heard is that we're trying to create a corporation around nuclear waste storage that has little oversight from local communities in order to get away from people during elections being able to voice concern about how administrations are behaving.
Well, I'm just the facilitator here, but I'll comment first. I don't think that's what I heard today. In fact, I think that what I heard Lake say is that the communities need to be on board and that there needs to be some consent process, which was sort of the foundation of all of this discussion. But do any of the panelists want to add as well?
That's only at the outset, and so there won't be any requirement for training, exercising, interoperable communications, or working with the local community once they've accepted this private entity that may or may not be for profit within their communities.
Yeah, I'm not sure I heard that either, but it's a fair point, and that's why we're here, is having a robust discussion. I have to think that any kind of long-term process that involves the removal, disposition, and relocation of spent nuclear fuel is going to be a very robust process in community engagement, if what we're doing here today is any indication of that.
You know, maybe one of our panelists, Lake or
yeah, would anyone like to comment on it?
The TEP program in particular, the Transportation and Emergency Preparedness Program.
The which program?
The emergency, so I think the comment was.
Transportation Emergency Preparedness Program that the Navy uses for its spent nuclear. I've always envisioned to be a template for what you might do on the,
I mean,
utility side.
So transportation of spent fuel is regulated by a number of different entities. One is the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, one is the Department of Transportation, and states and localities also have a role. It's actually quite complex situation. And that is in part where emergency training comes in. But again, each organization, whether it's the Nuclear Regulatory Commission or the Department of Transportation, will have regulatory requirements for emergency response training and security training, et cetera. And again, you could also include something like this in your hosting agreement. So I think that this could all be specified.
Yeah, if I could just reinforce what Allison said. I mentioned in some of my remarks about the fact that the organization has to be a trust-building organization. It has to operate in a way that earns trust over time. And when we look at examples of where that's happened, one of the things that happens is the organizations that's responsible for running the program wants to engage with the people and the communities that are going to be affected, and not just tell them what they're going to do, but have a dialogue over time to understand what the interests and concerns of a community are and do something about it. Now, that do something about it doesn't necessarily translate into you tell me what you want and I'll do it every time. It's a dialogue so that the community and the implementer over time learn to trust each other and build in programs that directly respond to the concerns of the community. So I think the commenter, and I'm only getting about 50% of what you're saying, I apologize, but I think the commenter has a good point. It's important that if a community is going to host these facilities, they're in it for the long haul. And there has to be relationships for the long haul that stand that test of time. Whatever changes will occur over the many years that this will occur.
Thank you, Tom.
One more online, Gary.
Okay.
Gary Brown online.
Gary?
Yes, thank you. I really enjoyed the presentations. I think they're a milestone. I heard a little bit of this more conceptually last year in Denver at a conference. As much as we've reused the word trust, I probably don't think we've used it enough. When you look at Finland and Sweden, one basic thing that hasn't been mentioned is the people there have far more trust in their government and what their government tells them than we have here. If anything, our government and our country, we're at an all-time low in trust. And so with that in mind, when you kind of quickly say, and I understand it, we're going to let we're going to privatize this. I can see all the benefits of that, but so many times in this country, when we've let industry become its own regulator, things have quickly gone off a cliff. And so I think more attention and maybe sensitivity to saying, let's just privatize this. And I know you brought up the advisory, but I don't think that has been vetted enough, because trust for what we're trying to do in this country is going to be not only a long time effort, but we're going to have to change so many of things. And the only way we can do this, I think, is to start over with like Nucorp or something like it, because all we've experienced is 44 years of abject failure with the DOE. And I don't see that really, maybe the current administration has some new ideas, but another administration will have new ideas and we'll get nowhere. And so I think this is a great concept, but I think the trust has got to be more thoroughly vetted in how we not only develop this, but how we explain it. Maybe you can comment on that?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think it's an excellent point. Nothing is going to really go forward without trust. And if you all have ideas on how to increase trust with what we've come up with here, we're all ears. I mean, we'd love to hear your ideas on how to improve the idea of the advisory committee, for instance. So, yeah, send them along.
Thank you.
Okay. I think it's been a great discussion. We're only about 30 minutes behind here, so it's been obviously a robust discussion. I had a few questions, but they've all been addressed. So I think I'm going to call the question here and be done and turn it back to you, Dan.
Thank you. Gosh, what a robust discussion. I think this is exactly what we hoped for this meeting. So I want to thank the CEP members and the members of our panel for this, and this discussion is going to continue shortly with members of the public being able to make their comments and ask their questions. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. And the next slide after that. So here again are the directions for public comment. The CEP comment form link is available to submit a question or sign up to speak online. The names of the individuals who signed up to speak will be displayed on the slide. Manuel will facilitate the Q&A and call your name when it's your turn to speak. 3 minutes per person, please. A countdown timer is on the screen. We have 1 hour dedicated to public comment segment of the meeting. After public comments, Manuel will facilitate the public dialogue, generally addressing questions in the order that they are received. We will first cover questions for the panelists on the topic that we're discussing tonight. Then, if time is available, we'll address questions related to other general topics, presumably for SCE to answer. And with that, we are going to take a quick and 10-minute break. So please return in 10 minutes, no later.
It's no different ideas.
Okay, thank you so much. As I mentioned, that was a spirited and robust commentary by everyone, and I'm sure that it will continue. So now we're set up for public comment. We will now welcome public comments and questions. The CEP form link is on the slide if you wish to sign up and speak or submit a question. Names are listed, I see a number of them, on the left side of the speaker queue in the order received. We will begin with members of the public who are with us and are at the casino this evening, and then move to the online questions. Manuel will facilitate the public comment. Manuel, you want to take it from here?
Yep, thank you, Dan. And thanks, everybody. Agreed. Very good discussion this evening. It is a panel discussion, as the title suggests. So first up is George Phillips. George, you have, can you approach the lectern? Do we have George?
That's Jerry Phillips.
Oh. Say again? Okay, not seeing Phillips. So second is Ronald Askeland. And pronounce your name for me, please. I butchered it, I'm sure.
Hello, I'm Dr. Ronald Askeland from San Diego.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
So I have a PhD in chemistry and 35 years of industrial experience, and I've done some radioactive tracer studies and neutron activation, so I know a little bit about nuclear chemistry. I had a chance to talk to Lake over the break, and yeah, I wish he could convince me that it's nothing to worry about, but I'm very, very concerned about the deadly radioactive nuclear waste at Songs. I think it's one of the most important problems we have in Southern California. A contamination failure that releases this deadly waste would be catastrophic to our economy, to human health, and the environment. We have 3.6 million pounds of highly reactive spent fuel stored in corroded steel canisters, never meant to last beyond 25 years, located 108 feet from the beach in the middle of a tsunami zone, right next to the Newport Inglewood earthquake fault in an area that's susceptible to terrorist attack. Action must be taken now to address this threat. Reprocessing San Onofre's nuclear waste is a false solution. It's too expensive and actually creates larger volumes of waste. We can't wait for a long-term federal depository for high-level nuclear waste to be established. Immediate action must be taken. We need to relocate the waste to a facility that's federally designated, geologically stable, away from population centers and coastlines. We need to replace the existing canisters with thicker, more durable alternatives designed for long-term resilience. And we need to provide continuous radiation monitoring conducted by independent scientists. The time to act is now. We don't want to be remembered as the generation who allowed Southern California to be turned into a nuclear radioactive wasteland for thousands of years. Thank you.
Thank you. And so, Dan, I think your intent is to answer each question as they are posed?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Manuel.
Is your intent that we answer each question as posed? I think you're looking for a revision as compared to prior. Yeah. So I'll start by answering this particular question then on behalf of SEE. Yeah. So thank you, Ronald, for your question. Multi-part question. I'll do my best to cover it. So yes, spent nuclear fuel does need to be isolated from the biosphere as it is now in the independent spent fuel storage installation. Just a couple of things that I picked up. Maybe it's details, but these are many of the topics that you covered have been discussed here in prior CEP meetings, all of which are on songscommunity.com, and there's a wealth of resources on there. Some things like the lifespan of the canisters. The canisters are actually, per the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, good for 100 years or more with a sort of a healthcare maintenance program, an aging management program, as it's called by the NRC. And yeah, so it does need to be relocated. It is designed, by the way, for the current conditions, including the Newport Inglewood fault. That is the most relevant fault to the site. And the site is designed, and the ISFSI, the Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation, is designed to withstand all natural and man-made hazards, including earthquakes and tsunamis. But I appreciate your concern. We're not complacent. We at SCE, we are actively working to compel the federal government to provide the facility that customers paid for. And so we remain very active in this space. If you want to help, advise that one way that you can help is to join the Spent Fuel Solutions Coalition. There's no cost to join as an associate member, a supporting member, it's called. We don't need your money, but we really need your voice and we need your support in order to move forward on offsite storage and disposal. Okay, so next up is Rudy Salazar with the Randsburg Project.
Good evening, and thank you to the Community Engagement Panel and Southern California Edison and all its participants and the guests here. Mr. Lake, I saw online in Washington with Dan Stetson, 2024, I guess that was, or I thought it was this past year, 2025, but time flies. Anyways, my name is Rudy Salazar, and I am the founder of the Randsburg Project. I own 58 acres property in eastern Kern County, California, that is being evaluated for potential inland site for California's future nuclear fuel management needs. And that's obviously it's being evaluated by me primarily. This is my initiative, and I'm pushing it and just making noise from the hilltops about this. The U.S. Department of Energy, as we all know, is doing this NLIC, and I am proposing to put an NLIC framework together for the governor, and I'm hoping that I could get the utilities, the three utilities here in California to acknowledge it and hopefully get the governor to sign on to get a seat at the table for this discussion before it's too late. So I just wanted to say hi, introduce myself to the public, and it's 58 acres out in Randsburg. And we can move the 291 spent fuel canisters off the coast and take it up to a more responsible site. My initial initiative was Plan A, is just me doing this and trying to get this off the coast. But now with this nuclear life cycle innovative campuses, this is now possibly a new avenue that hopefully we get a seat at the table and California gets part of this whole plan somehow, some way. And with Mr. Desmond's help, I'm sure we can get this happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudy. Appreciate your comments. Any response to more of a comment than a question? Thank you.
Talk to the governor. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And we've chatted offline as well about the nuclear life cycle innovation campuses with Mr. Salazar. So next we have Bart Ziegler with the Samuel Lawrence Foundation.
Thank you, panel. Nice to meet you. Thank you for your time, service. Nice to meet you, Professor. I'll read a quick note. With the Samuel Lawrence Foundation, we are focused currently on San Onofre and the spent nuclear fuel sitting in a precarious place. We also work with arts, science, and education, form communities of concern. Once Nucor has its advisory board that can veto or shape initiatives, what mechanisms exist so that outside stakeholders, especially those that become at risk later in the process due to transportation or new studies and developments, are represented? Will they have any meaningful legal recourse if the NRC rubber stamps Nucor's initiatives, especially if the site selected for the campus or repository is on DoD lands that have fewer civilian oversight avenues? And with that, I thank you.
Great. You want to start?
Thank you, Bart. Questions about the Nucor?
Yeah, good questions. The New Corp would be like DOE would go to the NRC, and it'd be the NRC processes for approvals. So rights of all of that would still be the same if it was New Corp or if it was DOE. The New Corp would be implementing the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. The Nuclear Waste Policy Act itself has requirements in it to work with the local people, all right, as well. So, for example, transportation. There's a section 180C. It says train the local folks with transportation corridors and that sort of thing. So those kind of requirements would still be there, no matter who it is. And New Corp would be, as we said, reactor owner run, but reactor companies, do have good relationships in most around the United States. Maybe here it's been a little rocky, but I mean, basically they're well respected, and as they are in Sweden, as you heard examples there as well. So I think the New Corp wants to have good relations with its neighbors wherever it is, okay, and it's going to want to reach out and treat people fairly and be a good neighbor. All right, so I think that process is going to be there, and you still have the fallback of the requirements of the NRC and also the advisory committee that Allison went through in some detail, which is an important part of having good relationships and maintaining their hosting agreements. And it'd be hosting agreements where the host communities can put in what they want in that, and that would be a legally binding agreement between the New Corp, and the local people and the state as well.
So, yeah, I mean, I think one way to get stakeholders' voices into the oversight process is through the advisory committee. But I also understand that you can't have everybody and their brother on the advisory committee, right? So I'm going to turn the question back to you. So how would you suggest getting stakeholders' voices to New Corp?
I'm familiar with your work with Rod Ewing.
Yeah.
And
closer to the mic.
I guess 10 years ago he had the...
Can you talk a little closer to the microphone?
Yeah. 10 years ago we published that paper, I think.
Right, the reset report? Yeah.
Yeah. We said you have some people from the corporate interests, some people from political interests, some of the community members, and then include scientists.
Right.
I think that balance would provide
a
good advisory board. It would be a above reproach.
Yeah. Thank you.
Also want to thank you for the paper with Leslie Kroll.
Oh, of course.
Thank you, Bart. And thank you, Leg. Thank you, Allison. So next question is from Daryl Gale. Daryl, 3 minutes.
Hello. These remarks are aimed at a lot of anger towards Edison, not the people who work here in the room, but Edison in general. Edison, you made a terrible, deadly mistake in 2019. Our beach is not your waste dump. Did you ask the citizens of Southern California if you could dump it on our beach? Did you ask the indigenous peoples who have lived here for millennia? No, you just asked the captured, coerced Coastal Commission, convincing them that it was all right to do it. Did you ask our state legislature, the governor, the local mayors? It was a big, deadly mistake in 2019. I was there in Chula Vista in 2019. And I've gone to all the meetings I could. But here's how you can rectify it. Go buy or borrow some hot cells from the Navy, from Europe, build your own, I don't care, and then get up some big industrial cranes and get it up and off the beach without scraping it anymore. And then we can worry about getting the DOE or the DOT or somebody to take it away, to take it to Idaho, take it to Hanford. They're already contaminated like crazy. Take it across the street, or this gentleman's place. We can take it here. But just get it off the beach before a tsunami or an earthquake comes. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you, Daryl. Thank you for being here and taking time from your evening to join us. I do appreciate that. And we chatted a little bit earlier. So I appreciate your frustration. Yeah, we're the stewards of the spent nuclear fuel. We are doing our absolute best to keep that spent fuel on site in a safe condition until the federal government performs. In the meantime, things like hot cell, we've covered that in previous meetings. The hot cell would not be needed at this time. And again, the canister systems, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, are good for 100 years or more, and we have an aging management program. So that aging management program allows us to make sure that we are inspecting these canisters on a periodicity to make sure that they remain in good shape and continue to perform their containment function. But once again, we are working very hard in order to get the spent fuel off-site. We do recognize there are a number of good reasons to get the spent fuel off-site. It's what our customers, what retail customers paid for in terms of contributions to the Nuclear Waste Fund, and we appreciate that the communities around San Onofre never consented to the long-term storage of spent fuel in their community. So, yeah, you have our commitment. We're working hard on this issue. We are, we are encouraged by the current approach, but we really do need to make some of this happen, whether it's in legislation in a lame duck session, as was mentioned earlier, or other, in order to really get on a more durable path for the spent fuel program. But once again, I thank you for your comments. Going back to do we have, the only other card I have is from George Phillips. Do we have George Phillips in the room? If not, then we'll transition to other questions that we have in writing. Okay, so we have 3 questions from Van Snyder. The first, so I'll read these off. The first question from Van is, sorry, was there a comment? Question from Van Snyder is, what are NRC and SONGS and CEP and Spent Fuel Solutions doing to amend the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, I think he means to say, so that its fund can be used for spent fuel processing instead of funds being required for Yucca Mountain? So there, I guess what I would say with regard to the Nuclear Waste Fund is it's already been addressed to a large degree in this panel discussion, but those funds, at least at present, can only be used for disposal. But as was discussed earlier, there are some who suggest that perhaps at least part of that fund could be used for to support reprocessing. So we're aware of all this. It does appear that we're trying to head toward a place where here in the U.S. we are reprocessing and recycling used nuclear fuel. But this is definitely the matter of the Nuclear Waste Fund. Those funds were built on contributions from customers, including those in the communities around SONGS who paid for electricity produced by SONGS. So we are very mindful of that and continue to track this issue very closely regarding the Nuclear Waste Fund and how it is used to ensure as much as we can to make sure that that is used appropriately. Next question, also from Mr. Snyder, is what methods to reprocess spent nuclear fuel? So he basically goes into the fact there are a number of different ways to reprocess spent nuclear fuel. There's pyroprocessing, aqueous. There are a variety. There are also a number of different companies that are working with the entities that have responded to the RFI. So there are a variety of approaches here, and it's not clear exactly what might be done here in the United States, whether it's one or more of those. Some of them are being done at sort of the R&D level at the national labs, some of the national labs here in the U.S. So we'll continue to monitor this. There may be some reprocessing that gets done at least in the pilot stage by 2030 or somewhere in that time frame. But it sounds like Mr. Snyder has a decent handle on the range of reprocessing technologies that are currently either employed elsewhere in the world or in R&D here in the U.S. No? Allison?
It's not, you won't see anything by 2030, I promise you.
Okay.
Like 1,000% promise you, you know.
I'm not sensing a lot of wiggle room there. Okay. Appreciate that, Allison. Okay, so next question, also on reprocessing. Yeah, so just challenging the fact that, if you call it, so there's terminology matters here. So traditionally, we've considered spent nuclear fuel that's been through the reactor as spent fuel. And the plan for a long time in the U.S. is that it would go directly into disposal. But if you are going to recycle or reprocess, the current terminology or the more appropriate technology in that framework is used fuel. So Mr. Snyder, I recognize that, there is a difference. And that is part of the national dialogue. Okay. There was a question here that perhaps one of our, the three-member panel might want to comment on. There was a question about weapons proliferation, but, anything about proliferation of nuclear material that might be able to come as a result of separating the plutonium from uranium?
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
Anybody on the panel would like to address?
100%. When you reprocess spent fuel, you separate plutonium from the rest of the material, and that is a proliferation hazard because that plutonium could be directly used in a nuclear bomb. And that is why, after India in 1974 exploded their first nuclear bomb by diverting material from a Canadian-supplied reactor with U.S.-supplied fuel, that by reprocessing that used fuel to get that plutonium, that then President Ford and then President Carter indefinitely deferred reprocessing in the United States to set an example for the rest of the world. Because it is a proliferation risk and a great hazard. We do not need more nuclear weapons in the world. And so that should be a serious consideration before anybody reprocesses spent nuclear fuel.
I'll add with that, that yes, it is certainly a risk, and yes, it is something we have to be very careful with as a society. But since 1974, there is a large degree of requirements for proliferation control under the NRC rules, which any recycler would have to abide by, on how you would do that. I mean, the French do that today, and others. So the Japanese, and so yes, it's a risk. Yes, it's something that's very important. It doesn't necessarily mean you can't do it, but it is something that has to be addressed. So
yeah, you would at least have to add expensive safeguards.
Yes.
Expensive safeguards to any kind of reprocessing facility, and expensive security measures to any kind of reprocessing facility to ensure that nobody stole this material and diverted it for nuclear weapons. And just a side note on money, okay, seeing how there's been a lot of attention on reprocessing here. The Japanese have been building a reprocessing facility since 1997. It is 2026. Okay, this reprocessing facility is not complete. The last number that I saw reported for the cost of the reprocessing facility was more than 10 years ago, and it was around $25 billion. So one imagines that this reprocessing facility is now closer to the order of $40 or $50 billion. That is the amount of money in the spent fuel fund, and you still need a deep geologic repository. So Japan is still looking for a site for a deep geologic repository. Reprocessing is a management option for nuclear waste. It is not a final disposal method.
Yeah, I don't even think of it as a management option, frankly. It's an option to do something, but it, in first order, doesn't really change in kind the nuclear waste issue.
Right, correct.
The proliferation issue is quite complex. I mean, we're already a nuclear weapons state, so reprocessing, it seems, in this country, from a security point of view, why do you care, right? We already have all the weapons that we need. But the point is, it sets a standard of acceptability around the world. If we can do it, then why can't other countries do it? And many countries would like to do it. Some maybe because they think there's additional benefits in terms of extending the resource usage of the uranium and the produced plutonium. But some of them probably want to do what's called latent proliferation. Mm-hmm. And what latent proliferation means is countries want to get as close as they can to having everything you need for a nuclear weapon without raising your hand and saying, I'm going to build a nuclear weapon. That's kind of the concern that's been with Iran right now, is that Iran has been doing things that, while they claim they don't want a nuclear weapon, they are walking, talking, and quacking like they want a nuclear weapon. They're enriching uranium to higher and higher levels that get you closer and closer to the material. You can make a weapon with high enriched uranium or plutonium. Plutonium comes out of a reactor, high enriched uranium comes out of an enrichment plant. Either way, these countries get closer and closer so that the gap between what they have and having a serviceable weapon gets smaller and smaller. And so it would take them less time, less money, less detectability to get to the place where if they decided to have a nuclear weapon, we would have less and less certainty to detect it and less time to stop them. So there is a definite proliferation concern here. It's not theoretical, it's real. And it's true not just in Iran, but it's been true in many other concerns with other countries as well. It's interesting to note, Allison mentioned that India detonated a nuclear device, I think in 1973, somewhere in there.
74.
Years later, they detonated another one, and Pakistan detonated 5 in response. So it leads not just to proliferation, but it leads to regional instability. And if my neighbor, who I don't trust, has one, I want one as well. So it can lead to great instability. So it's a real concern.
Mm-hmm.
If I may, to some extent, your concerns also apply to enrichment.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even more so.
And we're not stopping enrichment in the U.S. Because we want to set a precedent for the rest of the world not to enrich uranium. So that's another angle that we can look at things.
Thank you. Thank you for the answers. Appreciate that. The next question is from Doris Fisk. So Doris Fisk, pardon me, Doris Fisk is frustrated, clearly. So she's concerned about the removal of the spent fuel. She'd really like to know when the waste will be removed. There's awareness of the timeline, but temporary to a better location, a permanent disposal site. We're done hearing it. So Doris is clearly frustrated. Certainly on behalf of SCE, I guess I can say that we appreciate the frustration. We've talked a lot tonight about the level to which the DOE and the federal government are behind plan. That's why we're active in this space. In terms of the timing, I think at this point it's shifting now. In the last couple of years, I've heard DOE personnel talk about perhaps consolidated interim storage being available in the mid to late 2030s, but that's not certain. And a deep geologic repository takes a lot more time because of all the ologies, as Tom mentioned earlier. So that would be much further off into the future. But yeah, stay tuned in because, we will watch closely what happens with these innovation campuses because at least with those states that included storage or disposal on site, that may be a near-term path forward. Okay, so Jerry Phillips. So while we don't have Jerry Phillips in the room and I guess was expected to sign up and speak in person, the question was about are states currently open to hosting disposal sites? So I can take that one and perhaps the panel can weigh in if they have further information. But my understanding is that at present there are 4 states that well, there are 26 states, of course, that replied to the RFI. There are 4 where they were really responsive to the part of the, perhaps vague part of the RFI that was related to disposal. And so those 4, as I understand it, are Tennessee, Utah, South Carolina, and Nebraska. My understanding is that there is a 5th state that chooses to, maintain a low profile at this point. But those are the 4, at least, that I'm aware of that have been open about accepting spent nuclear fuel for disposal. Any clarification, Lake?
Not much, but there's a range. I mean, many states said they would be interested in discussing deep borehole disposal. Didn't name a site particularly. Tennessee talked about a region, said they would be interested in discussing the Cumberland Plateau. That's basically, Western Appalachia for a potential disposal site. Utah expressed an interest they would consider discussing salt domes in Utah. So there were, but as far as a specific site per se, maybe in some of the proprietary ones they had it, but others did discuss about low-level waste in existing, like in Utah and Clive, which is a low-level waste disposal site. So there's some discussion about those things. But as far as a specific deep geologic repository site, I'm not aware of any other than what Utah did. But there may be some.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, next up, so Charles, are you looking to participate in comment?
Yeah, I would like to comment and ask a question. May I?
Please, 3 minutes.
Sure. I'd like to thank Lake Barrett and Allison McFarland for coming out here, and I think this has been a really terrific community engagement panel meeting. And I am particularly concerned about the report of the nuclear waste leaking out of the 55-gallon drums. And I'm hoping you can tell us what the date was on that so we can look up the event report at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or perhaps Edison could make the event report on this public that would have been filed with the NRC. I also want to comment on or echo Ms. McFarland's comments regarding plutonium reprocessing. It's a really bad idea because plutonium, the only real use for plutonium, in my opinion, is for nuclear weapons. It was the justification for building many nuclear power plants in the first place. The electricity was literally a byproduct of nuclear power in order to get plutonium. And then finally, a question for Mr. Barrett. You said that the fuel was old and cold. And when I first started participating in these meetings, the original gentleman, Dr. David Victor, was referring to the storage as cold and dark. So I was really surprised when I learned that if you touched one of these canisters, it'd probably fry your hand off, because if I recall correctly, the fuel rods were, 1,700 degrees or something inside a stainless steel canister, and you'd probably be dead within a few hours of getting close to one of these canisters. And so I looked up the cool down period for high burnup fuel, and it says it's 452 degrees after 15 years. So, that's hot enough to combust paper spontaneously. So I'm wondering, when we're talking about old and cold and dark, when is this stuff really cold? I mean, do we have to wait 50 years or 100 years? Maybe you could give us some guidelines on that. Thank you very much.
Sure. I mean, basically, relative to when a reactor is operating, okay, I mean, there's a lot of heat coming off those fuel assemblies. It makes the steam. But after decades, like most of your fuel here, the heat load is low. I don't know what the numbers are in the canisters, but I mean, we're talking 4 or 5, maybe 10 hair dryers, okay? This is not going to burn you, all right? Now, is it still high radiation? Absolutely, okay? You don't go up next to a fuel assembly or next to one of these canisters. But as far as any energy, as the lady from Orange County in the emergency plan, there's very little energy is going to drive that off-site. Now, could there be a terrorist attack, and if somebody hit it with a high explosive armor-piercing something or other, there'd be some local type of thing? Yes, but there's no energy like a Fukushima or something like that, where you're going to drive things off-site. You're not going to get high enough to have hydrogen gas and that kind of thing that you could have, metal oxidation. So you're not going to get it when it's old and cold. My probably inappropriate words, but nonetheless, as far as cold and dark, I don't know what that one has to do with it. Like that's like no electricity, okay? But as far as the risk of old fuel is nowhere near as high as risks are when it's young or when it's operating, as far as energy is concerned. But there's still a risk, and it's still important. That's why millions and millions of dollars are spent at it to keep it safe. And at low risk, right? Safe is the word I try to avoid, because there's a risk in everything. Every breath you take is a risk, okay? I accept that because I want to live. But I mean, there's all kinds of, safety is your perception of risk. But the risk of dry storage, passive storage, is fairly low from an emergency planning point of view, which is what the lady I thought she was asking for.
If I could just mention, because it's come up a couple of times tonight, the CEP several years ago did one of these sessions dedicated to the security risks of the waste on site. I was one of the people who talked. There was a panel of people who talked about what those risks were, what the NRC requirements were, what the potential damages were. And so for those of you who are interested in learning about the security risks of terrorism, for example, I assume it's available on the site, and you can get a lot of information about that.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So there was a multi-part question with respect to the shipment. That question, we have Mark Morgan. If we can unmute Mark Morgan, he's going to deliver that part of the answer.
Yes, so the drums were opened at the Clive facility. We were notified of that on March 17th, and I believe they were opened, within 24 hours prior to that. But I want to reiterate, the question implied that there was leakage from the drums. There was not leakage from the drums, and in part based on that, it was not a reportable event at the time. So again, the best information that's in the public venue, if you want to find out more about it, is the inspection report. And the Adams number was listed in the slide as part of the deck.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, is there a comment? So thank you, Charles. And Charles, I don't think I mentioned, so Charles Langley is with Public Watchdogs.
I do have a follow-up question. So this was, I thought I heard the word leak. So was it a radiation leak?
No.
Or
No.
So the issue at hand was we shipped it as solid waste, and then when it arrived at Clive and they opened the drums, they realized that there was liquid in the drums beyond the limit for what's allowed for the shipment of solid waste. There were no indications of leakage, though.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for that. So then online we have Carl Perez. So I think Carl Perez has some questions. Can we unmute Carl and allow Carl to ask his questions?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Perfect. Yes, just wanted to thank all the panelists for coming for a very informative discussion on where we're headed on the path forward for nuclear waste disposal. And frankly, I used to be anti-nuclear and also anti-reprocessing. My father actually protested against the construction of nuclear power plants in France, and I've really revisited my opinions once I started, really understanding the facts and, relying less on opinions. And I think being able to use these public engagement panels for sources of really, factual information is really important. And so, I definitely want to point a couple of questions to Dr. McFarlane. And I tried to really limit the questions to be easy yes or no's. But I guess the first one is, in the spirit of open minds, reprocessed uranium, contrary to what you previously said on this panel, is in fact used to power 4 units of 900 megawatts in France at the Cruas facility.
Carl, I'm sorry to cut you off. So
Yes.
Can you get closer to your microphone, please? It's difficult to hear you in the room here.
Okay, let me try again. Is now better?
Yes.
Okay. So again, I'll just keep it short, but I think information is really important for these public meetings, and I really wanted to direct 4 yes or no questions to Dr. McFarlane. And in the spirit of open minds, reprocessed uranium, contrary to what you previously said on this panel, is in fact used to power 4 units of 900 megawatts of reactors in France at the Cruas facility. It's also been used in the Netherlands, Germany, Japan, India, Canada, Switzerland, amongst many other countries. Would you like to correct your earlier statement for the record that reprocessed uranium cannot and will never be used during your exchange with Supervisor Desmond?
No, my statement is correct.
That you cannot use reprocessed uranium?
No, my statement was reprocessed uranium is not used very much at all because it is contaminated with uranium-232 and 236, which you don't want to put into your reactor, so you have to remove the 232 or 236 or dilute it enough. And there aren't many centrifuges around the world, except maybe in Russia, that would accept that dirty uranium for enrichment. And so therefore, it's very expensive to reuse, and therefore it's not used.
So the facility of Framatome in Romans-sur-Isère that I visited 5 weeks ago, looking at reprocessed uranium being fabricated into fuel to go into the 4 reactors, was pure imagination, I guess.
The French have looked at this. I'm looking at Fred because he's knowledgeable, more probably firsthand knowledge. But the French have looked at this and they've done a little, but they haven't done a lot with reprocessed uranium because it's expensive. And guess what? Regular uranium-based fuel is just a lot cheaper.
Yeah, likewise. It's worth mentioning that the French do, and Fred, please feel free to comment. The French do reprocess,
Yeah.
but the idea that we would have sequential reprocessing and over time convert more and more of the uranium into plutonium, and then the plutonium would be used as a fuel, is very, very difficult. The French are only reprocessing once
Right.
for very much the same kind of reasons
Yeah.
that Allison just mentioned, that other isotopes of the plutonium build into the plutonium, and they make the use of it as a fuel very inefficient. So
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So it's called monocycling, what France does.
Yeah.
And so you can read about this in a National Academy of Sciences report from 2022 called The Merits and Viability of Nuclear Fuel Cycles, et cetera. I mean, if you just look at Google National Academy of Sciences, Merits and Viability, this report will come up.
Okay, thank you. But I do confirm that, yes, there are 4 units in France that do run with reprocessed uranium. Just want to mention that the French, when they went into the using MOX fuel, it was in part to bridge the gap to the Gen 4 reactors, and they were on the path to definitely closing the fuel cycle when political changes put a stop to their approach to it. So it is feasible. It is more expensive to re-enrich, reprocess uranium than natural uranium, but it doesn't mean that you can't have cascades of enrichment that could be dedicated to that.
The other, on reprocessing again, the other issue we haven't talked about is that all countries that have reprocessed civilian spent fuel for reuse as MOX fuel now have massive stockpiles of separated plutonium that they have not been able to keep up with using. And so I think France's stockpile is now about 70,000 metric tons, which is a problem.
No, not 70,000
that wouldn't be
metric
that
tons.
much. It's maybe 70 metric.
So, sorry, 70 metric tons, yes.
Japan has about 46.
Yeah, the UK has over 100 metric tons, so.
Okay. So thank you, and thank you for the answers. Thank you for the questions, Mr. Perez. Moving to the next person online, that is Jeremy Pearson. So if we can unmute his mic. Do we have Mr. Pearson? Okay, not hearing whether we have Mr. Pearson and not hearing him come.
Okay, sorry, Manuel. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Okay, thank you, Manuel, and thank you to the panel. This is Jeremy Pearson with Utah Office of Energy Development, and I don't have an official statement prepared on behalf of our office, but I just thought it would be worth jumping on for a second just to say hello and to thank Chairwoman McFarland and Lake Barrett for their report. And it's great that we're summarizing all the thought over the last decade, 15 years. It's useful for states like ours who have submitted the Innovation Campus proposal. And so just wanted to let everyone know that we have indeed submitted a proposal, and while it is very recent and new to a lot of people, we lived and breathed it for the last 3 months that we were working on it, and our proposal is available on the Utah Office of Energy Development's website for review. And to Chairwoman McFarland's comment that you made earlier that that some applicants may have not understood that that storage of fuel was the center motivation of this RFI. Just wanted to say, as our state was submitting a response, this was our understanding from the very beginning, and that we're very much interested as a state in working with other states and on finding a solution to this problem. So love for you to reach out to us, review our RFI, and continue the conversation. And well done to CEP in Southern California, and everyone in California that's been working on this. I grew up in Southern California, did my PhD at UC Irvine when San Onofre was being shut down, and went to multiple meetings there with Southern California Edison, went to the waste confidence hearings, and even went to DC with some students and met you, Allison, with the nuclear engineering student delegation. And so just really know the concerns that you have down there, and really understand those concerns, and looking forward to working together with you to find a wonderful solution moving forward here. So thank you.
That's great. Thanks.
Jeremy, I just want to thank you and the state of Utah for Clive, Utah, and accepting so many shipments from Songs.
An early thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson, and thank you, Allison, for the support on the answer. Okay, moving on, we do have a question from Peter Jones. Can we unmute Peter? Peter, still online?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, Peter.
Good evening, and I am Peter Jones. I work with SLF, and I was lucky enough to attend the Mike Levin sponsored meeting last week. And as it just so happens, I was in communication with a few staffers on the Hill and talked about, Dr. McFarland's and Len Lake's proposal, and they were more interested than I would have expected out of the get-go, and they, had the more concrete questions than I expected. So they were wondering what would be a good template for Newport, and something that you alluded to earlier, the consortium that eventually became a private company in 2010 selling uranium. So I was just wondering if there were entities, legislation, or any type of template that you could point me to, as we look for partners to start building out this legislation. And is like Sematech, is that, aside from the need to have local and state partners on the board and NRC oversight, is the semiconductor public-private partnership that was aimed at catching up America's semiconductor industry in the 80s. That was a public-private partnership between semiconductor industry and government, and had a slow phase in terms of funding from being entirely the U.S. government to get it up to speed, and then phase into funding from the industry. Is something like that a good place to start from, or what would you recommend as we're actually trying to build more concrete proposals? Like, how fleshed out is the proposal in terms of the legislation that it would take, the design of the entity proposed? Just very interested, and there's more interest and momentum than I ever would have dared to hope. So thank you. The panel, the speakers are fantastic. Southern California Edison template. What do you have for me?
Well, thank you. That's encouraging what you've said. I'll give you a couple of models. There's no perfect one, but as far as a partnership, there was back in the 1960s the West Valley reprocessing plant in New York. Now, it technically didn't work out very well, but nonetheless, it was a state of New York, NYSERDA, which is New York State Energy and Research and Development, I believe, and Getty Oil were the original companies, put together a partnership where it was on state land and all that. So, I mean, that was a business model. Now, the approach with the life cycle campuses, it's privately driven for a business point of view. So, I mean, there was a model there, they did that. Now, it didn't pan out well, technically speaking, and economically speaking, And, the safety risk situation changed with time. But, I mean, that wasn't a model. Another model is you look at the United States Enrichment Corporation, which was split off from DOE, which was legislative. I don't think the federal government had to change much as far as laws in the case of West Valley, but they did have to do to put out the USEC model out from DOE. But, I mean, that didn't go so well for other reasons, but nonetheless, as far as legislation. I think when you start looking at a hybrid of the public service corporations, which we talk about a little bit in our report, you start looking at things like the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, metropolitan airports of D.C. You start looking at TVA to some degree, but TVA is federally controlled, where presidents appoint people and fire people and that sort of thing. To me, it's a little too close to the federal government, so I don't like the TVA model particularly. But it is single purpose and is probably better than DOE. But I mean, I think though it's in reverse. I don't think you can start looking at what's the corporate entity look like, the new corp look like, until you have the host state sitting down with private industry that said, this is what we want to do in my state. How do I do that with a federal government without this going belly up when it changes? It's getting out of the 2, 4, and 6-year election cycle. So starting with a state proposal, okay, and a governor saying, and private industry stepping up and saying, I will bring this money in and I will do these things, and the state has got wide open eyes on how credible what they're promising, and they have guardrails on it. That's when you start. So we have a host state, and you have a DOE that says, this sounds reasonable to me. Then you start putting together the legislation, okay? So without a host state and this MOU that DOE is trying to work on, hopefully this summer, I mean, that would be the basis where a governor says, I will do this, and the community says, I'll do that, and then it starts to go together, and then the Congress will follow the state and follow the private industry, and DOE will be part of the catalyst bringing that together, because the new entity will be implementing the Nuclear Waste Policy Act responsibilities of the Secretary. So it goes from the Secretary to the new corp. But the details of that, and there's lots of devils in the details. I mean, there's things about who's going to pay the fee, when you're going to pay the fee, how you transition these things, how you get to corpus, all of these things, and then you have to pass the legislation, and you're going to deal with PAYGO and a whole lot of other little arcane things. You got to get 60 votes in the Senate. All of these kind of things work into it. But starting with just the legislation alone for the entity, I think it's hard without a host state saying, here's the plan.
Just to add or contrast, I think, clearly you need to amend the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. If you're looking at ways to do that, again, you really have to solve both the financial problems and the implementer. If you want to use a new corp as an implementer, Canada did this in 2002-ish. And so just look at what Canada did. The law isn't very long. It's very easy to read. And you can adapt from there,
Good. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Okay, moving on to the next person online, we have Kayleen Walker. If we can hear from.
Just out of curiosity, are we at the hour mark soon?
Yes, we're over. I think
we are past it.
Okay.
Over on time.
On proceeding tonight?
We're about to wrap it up, aren't we? After.
Yes, as Dan would suggest, we're about to
Hello,
wrap it up.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you
So
hear me?
should we have one last question from Kayleen? Or-
So we have one last question.
Hello? Can you
Yes,
hear
go
me?
ahead. Go ahead, Kayleen.
3 minutes.
Okay, so I found it interesting that Lake Barrett's slide 24 said, complex social, political, legal, economic, and financial interactions, blah, 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 will be necessary. I'm wondering when the technical issues will be addressed. It's so quick to say it's a political issue, but when you look at the technical stuff, it becomes a real situation. I attended numerous Nuclear Waste Technical Review Board meetings and NRC technical meetings regarding canister degradation, fuel degradation in storage, and the problems with the higher burnups, anything above 35 gigawatt days per metric ton of uranium. All of a sudden, all the hydride rate and the cladding, and you have the radial hydrides, and you have the ductile to brittle. So the stuff becomes more brittle, and then you have cladding failure. All of these things are very real, and there's a lot of research that's been done on it, but none of this is being addressed at all at San Onofre or any of the other storage facilities. And yes, it's been discussed, but only a one-way conversation. Like if I ask a question tonight, you'll answer it, but usually my mic is shut off, so you can never do a follow-up conversation. We've never had a thorough dialogue regarding canister degradation. This is very serious because we know we have canisters that were stainless steel canisters that were gouged against carbon steel, and we have carbon embedded into the canisters in certain cases. This could lead to pit corrosion, right? I think that the fact that Edison and the NRC and everybody with their inspection management plan that got approved by the Coastal Commission, you're not really taking this storage facility seriously. So what is the canister degradation rate, and what are the consequences of canister failure? When the Garden Grove incident happened up there, a few weeks ago, and 50,000 people got evacuated, because they thought it might blow. There is absolutely zero contingency plan for any kind of abnormality with a canister. So I'm wondering who in this panel or who is willing to have a technical follow-up conversation with the public, with someone like myself. Thank you.
Dan? Alice McNally is waiting to speak.
Yeah, sorry. Hold on here a second. So that was Kayleen, right? Am I missing my name? Yeah, okay, so Kayleen Walker. So Kayleen, yeah, so clearly you're frustrated. I would just say that we have had spent quite a bit of time, overtime, talking about canisters, canister integrity, aging management program, the related IMP, inspection and maintenance program. I would point back to the October 2025 special meeting that we had with a third-party expert, Dr. Jimmy Burns, who's with the Electric Power Research Institute and a true expert in this space. So, we've tried real hard to be clear about the durability of these canisters, the duration of these canisters. At the same time, yeah, these canisters are not designed for permanent. It's not a permanent solution, and that's why we're talking here tonight about permanent solutions to the disposition of spent nuclear fuel. So with that, Dan, I think I have to apologize to a couple of folks online who we did not get to. We did not get to.
Well, Manuel, with all due respect to everyone, I think we're already over 3 hours. And for those who might want to save their questions for our next meeting, we're certainly welcome to them. So I want to thank everyone for participating. Victor has
my brief comment. I
Okay.
just want to thank all the panelists, but insightful discussion. The legislation approach it's a viable one. It's going to take a long time, I think, in my view. And I think the alternative that I mentioned earlier is that we've got to look to, and it may be after 5 years of legislation that we end up where we are in an administration where they're moving and there's an option. There's windows that open every once in a while. I think there's a big window that's open right now. I think we have to get behind this administration, see what they're doing, see if there's a way to push and use this committee's efforts to say, this is how it can happen. This is what will make it happen right now and quicker. And that's what we have to look at as a committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor. And I want to thank everyone for their comments on this marathon meeting. Fred, I want to turn it over to you for some closing comments.
Yes, I'll be quick. I just want to thank everyone who joined. Of course, thank you to the panelists who joined us tonight. I'm really encouraged by the growing momentum around spent fuel management. We're certainly actively monitoring these developments. We're positioning songs to be ready when the opportunity to ship our fuel materializes someday. In the interim, our fuel remains safely stored, and we'll continue inspection and monitoring of our canisters under our spent fuel aging management programs. We value in-person and hybrid engagement. We remain committed to transparency, and we'll continue to engage with the community. And we had one slide that refers to probably the next slide. Songscommunity.com is a great source for decommissioning updates. And please visit the site and reach out with any question. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Dan.
Thank you, Fred. First, I want to thank all the participants in tonight's meeting. Thanks to the technical team, everyone in the back of the room making this happen. Thanks to the SCE leadership. Chris, thanks for your excellent panel discussion. Of course, special thanks to Allison, Lake, and Tom for your participation in this meeting. You could have just done this virtually, but instead you made the trip. You showed up in person to meet the members of the local community, to look them in the eye, to address their concerns, and for that, we sincerely thank you. We learned a lot about the path forward. From what I can understand, there's a number of elements in this. Number one, we really need a new implementer, not subject to election cycles, to manage the transportation, storage, and disposal of spent fuel. Number two, we need reliable funding. Of course we do. And all of this path must be built on a foundation of trust. And this trust must be earned through demonstrated competence, a belief that the plans are made with the community's best interests in mind, and listening to and responding to the community's concerns. Next slide, please. One more. Next slide, please. Here you can see our schedule for 2026. So please mark your calendars. Our third quarter meeting will be on August 27, and we'll tentatively focus on the Department of Energy's canister monitoring demonstration project at Songs. I'm really looking forward to this. I remember talking with Paul Murray about this a long time ago, so I'm glad it's coming to fruition. Details for the next meeting will be posted on the CEP meeting webpage. Next slide. Thank you again for this marathon meeting. Thank you for a productive and an engaging, and most of all, a civilized meeting. Every voice is important. While we may not agree on everything, we all want the safe storage of the spent fuel while it remains at Songs, and we all wanted safe and timely removals. Safe travels, everyone. Good night.
Thanks, sir.